Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. A man with slick back hair who, even sitting there, was about the same height as him. I heard you're the person with the most military talent and ability in this world. Crocodile asked casually, holding a cigar in his mouth, seemingly having no intention of asking the other party to sit down first. Mima Amatori didn't mind and stood there, speaking softly. Yes, you could say that. At least before you appeared in this world, I didn't see anyone more outstanding than me. Everyone I saw was just mediocre. Upon hearing this, Crocodile suddenly felt an inexplicable oppressive aura. He really hadn't expected Mima Amatori to answer like this. Ha. 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 But almost at the same time, he was amused. The classic gasping laugh, like someone out of breath, mixed with the smoke in the air, echoed through the room. This left Mima Amatori speechless. What kind of person was this? Not only was his height ridiculous and his ability miraculous, but even his laughter was so characteristic. Was this the Planet C style? Interesting, kid. I'm starting to appreciate you now. Sit down. Thank you. Mima Amatori calmly sat down on the chair, but as soon as he sat down, he realized he had to look up at Crocodile, thinking to himself. I might as well have stayed standing. I received the order from the base over there. They want you to observe our process of occupying Konglakaku, right? And also send that general, whatever his name is, to you so you can personally kill your own father, right? Not bad, not bad. Sounds very interesting. Crocodile took the cigar out of his mouth, revealing a clearly sinister smile. However, I don't really like playing with brute force. How about you cooperate and we play a strategy? Upon hearing this, Mima Amatori didn't answer immediately but pondered for a moment before raising his head. Having an absolute combat power advantage but not wanting to launch a frontal assault, coupled with my identity, are you planning a redundant coordinated attack? Crocodile looked at him in surprise, thinking to himself. This kid. That's it. Because the little author spent too much time in the reader group, there wasn't enough time to write the midnight chapter, so there won't be any more after this chapter. However, I can still guarantee tomorrow's 3 chapters, it's just that the time is uncertain. I need some time to adjust and resume the midnight 3-chapter pace as soon as possible. Chapter 195, Everything in the world belongs to the world government. Splurt, a big mom with obvious wrinkles at the corners of her eyes looked at the headless corpse automatically pushed in front of her. Calmly, she plunged the dagger in her hand heavily into the corpse's chest, then began cutting along the edge of the heart. After tearing off the bloody, transparent membrane, she casually threw it into the wooden bucket beside her. Looking inside, one could see a thick stack already, which looked very bloody and terrifying. Especially the blood that splashed up occasionally dripped onto the blood-stained apron in front of her. The next moment, this corpse, which had lost its value, was slowly carried away by the roller beneath it. Immediately after, another headless corpse with black and purple skin was sent over. Looking around, this turned out to be a large factory with 7 roller assembly lines. A large number of men and women stood on both sides of the rollers, performing the work of cutting and removing the heart membrane. Around them, there were also army soldiers holding heavy assault rifles, constantly vigilant about the situation in the court. Phew. That's 19 already. Just one more and I'll have earned exactly 20,000 Bailey. This big mom looked at the terrifying corpse before her, yet her face broke into a smile. This place was originally a factory at Hidden Stone's Village tow station specifically used for repairing steam guns and small steam boilers. But now it has become a processing factory for Kabinari heart membrane. It could also be considered a trial project by the world government. After the 1,000 elite army led by Crocodile cleared the Kabane rampaging inside the city, they piled large numbers of corpses into the factory buildings around this factory. Then they hired the local surviving citizens to come and work. It is worth mentioning that the army did not use any coercion. They merely showed everyone an announcement, separating one heart membrane would earn 1,000 Bailey, which could then be used to purchase more bread, milk, and luncheon meat, and also some medicine for treating simple injuries and illnesses. In fact, these were all the army's military supplies. However, the higher-ups made a promise that in the future, Bailey would be the main currency of the entire nation. It's just that the citizens still held a skeptical attitude towards the last point. After all, the shogunate's rule of over 200 years had long been deeply ingrained in people's hearts. But using it temporarily to exchange for more food and medicine was indeed a rigid demand. Therefore, people signing up to come and work were in an endless stream. Although at first some people trembled with fear after seeing the kabane, when they discovered that these headless kabane were motionless on the roller line, allowing themselves to be butchered, they gradually adapted. For these citizens of Hinamoto who had faced the threat of kabane just a while away since childhood, the acceptance level for terrifying-sounding things like death, corpses, and flesh and blood was much stronger than those living in a peaceful society. Especially the people of this nation had a very strange mindset. That is, regardless of whether they were acquaintances in life, as long as a kabane wound appeared on their body, or they had even turned into a kabane, basically no one would hesitate whether or not to pull the trigger. And if they themselves encountered this situation, they could still suppress their fear, place the self-determination bag filled with gunpowder on their chest, and then personally pull the pull cord to blow through their own heart. This shows how high the resolve of these citizens of Hinamoto is. Inside a room inside the wall that was temporarily used as a meeting room, the gentle Yatsugawa, accompanied by the samurai Kurasu, was looking down at the document in her hand, which was written with astonishing content. Sitting across from her was a man in black in a suit, with a commanding presence. Behind him also stood two black-clad attendants with their hands behind their backs. So, the world government actually means this? Aya murmured to herself in disbelief. A government that rules over 170-odd nations in another world. Kurasu, who was behind her, also felt his pupils tremble violently at this moment. He thought to himself, no wonder these people look so strange, and are incredibly strong. And the man in black across from the two was also sizing up Yatsugawa. They had already thoroughly investigated the situation of this girl. She was the eldest daughter of Kensho Shifukawa, the former Yamagawa family head and chief steward responsible for governing Aragane Station, and also the niece of Dojin Makino, who held the high status of Rojo in the shogunate. She had now inherited the identity of the Yamagawa family head and chief steward of Aragane Station according to tradition. The so-called chief steward possessed the most esteemed status below the shogun, equivalent to the daimyo lords in Im's previous life in Japan, belonging to the higher samurai class. And Kurasa behind her was a low-ranking samurai, that is, a samurai. Presumably, you now know what the words world government represent. Now, allow me to introduce myself. The man in black facing Yatsugawa said, we are officials from the administrative department under the political affairs department. My name is Linode, a senior director. I will serve as advisor to guide you in managing this nation in the future, and even this entire world, which we call the Kabanrai world. What? Yatsugawa, who was not even 20, only 19 years old this year, raised her delicate face, full of Eastern charm, in shock. She quickly began to explain. You might have misunderstood, Counselor Linode. She said. I am merely the chief steward of Aragane Station. The one who rules all of Hinamoto is Kyu Amatori, the shogun of the shogunate. Please call me Linode, senior director. Thank you. Linode emphasized with a stern face. Senior director and counselor were not the same rank. Ah, I'm sorry, senior director Linode. Ayam quickly apologized. Seeing this, the former's expression slightly improved. Now, getting back to the main point. We did not misunderstand. Instead, we have decided to abolish Kyu Amatori's position as shogun, and have you, Yatsugawa, take the position. Do you understand now? This. Yatsugawa and the samurai Kurasu were completely stunned. The former even covered her slightly open mouth with her fair, tender palm in disbelief. They never expected to hear such treasonous words. You are really going to rebel against the shogunate? Rebel? Senior Director Linode looked at her strangely, spread his hands, and smiled. I think the word takeover is more appropriate. From the moment we descended upon this world, whether it is Hinamoto where we are now, or the overseas lands, the Great Sea, and the sky, they have already been automatically placed under the flag of the world government. And Kyu Amatori simply wasn't favored by us. As his words fell, the room fell into a moment of dead silence. Then Ayam suppressed the fear in her heart, tightly clutching the pink skirt on her thighs with both hands, and asked in a trembling voice. Then why me? Because you're the first chief steward who entered our sight and was successfully appreciated and recognized. Senior Director Linode smiled slightly. You are very lucky. Just because of luck? Yatsugawa gave a bitter smile. Just? Senior Director Linode admonished her earnestly. It seems you are still too young. You must understand that luck is a matter that can be compared to a miracle. Don't underestimate it. Ha. Yatsugawa Ayam bit her lip and subconsciously glanced at Kurisa behind her. Ever since Lucci pointed out the latter's feelings for her at the station that day, the relationship between the two had become subtle. At this moment, Kurisa saw Ayam cast a pleading gaze towards him. He immediately nodded heavily at her, conveying the firmness in his gaze. Seeing this, Ayam felt reassured. She turned her head and looked at Senior Director Linode with a resolute gaze. Excuse me? She asked. Can the world government behind you allow the citizens of Hinamoto to eat their fill, stay warm, and live in peace and contentment, and no longer suffer the threat of Kabane? Chapter 196, 3 Admirals Gather in the Kabanrai World. Salute. Salute. At the Stag Stargate base, 3 special guests arrived today, prompting all the officials, including Senior Director Addison, to appear and welcome them. The army soldiers on both sides executed the most standard military salute with the sharpest aura. Swish. As the electric gate of the biosafety station closed again, 2 men and 1 woman appeared on the land belonging to another world. Senior Director Addison, as the highest authority here, quickly walked over and greeted them with a smile. Welcome, Marshal Raymond, Minister Tsaru, and Admiral Akanyu, for your inspection. That's right. These 3 were military big shots, all holding the admiral rank, who had come from the Sea Star mainland to the world of Kabane. Although Tsaru was nominally the Minister of the Staff Department, since the Staff Department had not yet been formally established, she was still wearing the Marine's white Justice coat. Only the shoulder insignia on it had changed to the Admiral rank. As for Sakazuki, he had completely changed into the Army Admiral's black Justice coat, with his usual set of red suit and black leather boots underneath. And he was no longer an Admiral candidate but a true Army Admiral, arguably the fastest among the rooster, dog, monkey to be promoted to Admiral. However, strictly speaking, his strength had not reached the highest combat power level, but the Army headquarters was in urgent need of an admiral to hold the fort. Moreover, the Army was currently a second-rate force after all, so the requirement for admiral-level combat power was not as high as that of the Marine headquarters. Besides that, there was also the intention to place Sakazuki 1 rank above Douglas Barrett and Crocodile. As the files said, this world is indeed unremarkable, disappointingly ordinary. Marshal Raymond said with a laugh, looking at the clear blue sky, pure white clouds, and golden red sun above. This person seemed to have escaped the negative emotions of being demoted, appearing very natural and calm on the surface. There are some differences. The weather here is quite stable, similar to our 4 seas. It's just that earthquakes and typhoons occur frequently. Senior Director Addison explained politely, then looked at Minister Tsaru and Sakazuki, smiling. Speaking of the biggest difference, it's related to devil fruit users like the 2 of you. Oh? This indeed piqued their curiosity. Tell us. Senior Director Addison pushed up the expensive glasses on his nose and said. According to the research results of the researchers, there is no pyrobroin substance in the seawater of this world. This means the 2 of you can experience the feeling of swimming here. What? Such a matter exists. Minister Tsaru looked at him in surprise, and Sakazuki was also astonished. Pyrobroin was abbreviated as P substance by the Planet Sea scientists. It was the main component of sea stone crystal and the culprit that caused ability users to become weak and unable to swim when most of their body was covered by water. It could be said that in the Sea Star world, even fresh water contained a certain amount of P substance, so even taking a bath would cause some weakness. And for the 2 of them, one a Parimsha system wash fruit user and the other a Logia system mag fruit user, being unable to swim in water was already a truth like common sense. Why wasn't this content in the files? Sakazuki asked in a deep voice. Because this is a recently discovered result. I suppose the Homeland didn't have time to print it into written content. Senior Director Addison explained. Since that's the case, I must try it later. Minister Tsaru, who had not yet shown signs of aging, was in perfect condition in terms of appearance and figure. Her beautiful and strong face showed an expression of eager excitement. All right, take us to see those Kabane. I heard that's the only peculiar thing in this world. This old man has been looking forward to it for a long time. Marshal Raymond spoke up and instructed. As a non-ability user, he had no interest in P substance or swimming. He was someone who often went into the sea to catch 1 or 2 sea kings for dinner. Okay, this way please. Senior Director Addison quickly responded, then waved his hand to dismiss the officials behind him. He personally led the way, taking the 3 big shots to the gate of the Biochemical Research Institute. At this time, Director Fritz, who had already received the news, was waiting with Group Leader Ron and others, as well as Dr. Shawai. Even Director Fritz dared not act arrogant at this moment. He knew very well how much weight an admiral carried in the world government. It was simply incomparable to the previous crocodile. The two sides exchanged greetings, and just as they were about to enter the institute together, Marshal Raymond glanced at Dr. Xiaowei. He is from this world, right? Yes, this is Dr. Xiaowei. He is the most outstanding scientist in the field of the Kabinari virus in this world. Director Fritz introduced. Whether he's outstanding or not, I don't know, but the aura on him is really weak. He looks like a middle-aged adult, but he gives this old man the feeling of a child. After speaking, Marshal Raymond shook his head and walked into the institute, completely ignoring Dr. Xiaowei's unsightly expression. In fact, the latter had only recently learned this fact himself. The total number of cells in adults of their world was between 40 trillion and 60 trillion, while the total number of cells in these C-star world humans was as high as 150 trillion to 200 trillion. He heard this was just the value for humans under 2 meters in height, and there were many existences over 2 meters. If it were just this, Dr. Xiaowei wouldn't have many thoughts, as scientists were accustomed to respecting facts. But the contempt in Marshal Raymond's gaze and tone made him very angry. After all, no one likes to be discriminated against by others. Tsuru and Sakazuki said nothing about this, just silently followed in. Soon, everyone arrived at the small prison specifically used to confine test subjects. Marshal Raymond, Minister Tsuru, Admiral Akanyu, please look. These living dead with hearts emitting gunfire flash inside our ordinary cabane. They possess. Upon arriving here, Director Fritz personally introduced the various aspects of the cabane to them. Following that, they came outside the prison cell where the blue heart cabane brought by Crocodile was confined. It is the core that can create the Kabinari cluster black smoke. Its blood is the main materials used to create black blood and white serum. Among them, black blood can be used to create new form Kabinari, which is a very powerful cabane warrior. Their inventor is precisely this Dr. Xiaowei. He is an absolute genius. Director Fritz's words were clearly meant to help Dr. Xiaowei regain face. The latter was about to become a junior researcher at their Biochemical Research Institute, and as the dean, he couldn't watch him be humiliated for nothing. Is that so? How strong? Marshal Raymond asked indifferently. The energy bullet sprayed by the new form Kabinari has the power to destroy all buildings within a 2-kilometer straight line distance with a single strike. Most importantly, there is hope for mass production. Chapter 197, Devil Fruit Ability in Other World. One strike, one street, huh? That's interesting. Marshal Raymond, who was also nearly 3 meters tall, lowered his head and glanced at Dr. Xiaowei, saying, "So you are indeed a genius, but your body is too frail. In a few days, I'll have someone bring over a batch of Sea King's meat." Sea Kings? Dr. Xiaowei had no idea what this was, but he could sense that the army marshal's gaze and tone no longer held the previous disdain, which significantly improved his mood. "Thank you." Marshal Raymond nodded. With that, the slight unpleasantness between them was put behind them. This was also the former's way of letting Dr. Xiaowei understand that only truly capable people would earn his recognition and respect. "Oh, right, what did you mean earlier when you said there was hope for mass production?" Before Director Fritz could answer his question, Minister Tsuru, who was standing nearby, smiled and said, "This should be my mission, right?" "Yes." Director Fritz nodded heavily, then looked at Minister Tsuru with anticipation and said, "According to our observations and experiments, we've found that the Kabinari virus causes the most negative mental state in the infected, with the primary emotion being fear, and secondary emotions being the desire for blood and brutality. So I thought if there was a way to suppress or eliminate this negative spirit control over the brain, perhaps these Kabane could regain their self-awareness and become true Kabane warrior." Minister Tsuru pursed her lips and chuckled softly. "So you thought of my wash fruit ability. It is indeed a very feasible idea. What are we waiting for? Let's start now. I'm actually quite curious if my ability works on these creatures from other world." Okay, we'll start with the ordinary red heart Kabane." Director Fritz excitedly began instructing Group Leader Ron and others to quickly prepare. Meanwhile, Dr. Xiaowei was completely confused, thinking to himself, "What is the wash fruit ability?" Forgive Director Fritz, who was already nearing 70. He had actually forgotten to give Dr. Xiaowei a copy of the basic common sense data about Planet C. Or rather, it seemed everyone had forgotten about this. This resulted in people like Mima Amatori and Yatsugawa, although they roughly understood the concept of the world government, still knowing nothing about the situation on the Sea-Star mainland. Why was this? Perhaps they wanted them to learn slowly on their own. Group Leader Ron's side was very efficient. They quickly locked an ordinary Kabane in an empty prison cell, then carefully placed a clothes rack inside. However, they did not restrain the Kabane's operation, allowing it to move freely inside. But no one offered any opinion on this, because no one felt that this thing could pose any threat to her. Seeing this, under everyone's gaze, Minister Tsuru smiled and walked into the prison cell. As soon as the Kabane saw this fresh meat over 2 meters tall, it immediately became excited, its ferocious face filled with a desire for blood. Ho-eh-hoo. Facing such a terrifying pounce from the living dead, the heroic and spirited woman simply used her slender, fair palm to gently stroke the former's face, seemingly slow but actually fast. Swish, the next moment, as the wash fruit ability was activated, Dr. Xiaowai, standing outside the prison cell, watched in astonishment as the Kabane's body instantly became as thin as paper, and then was casually hung by Tsuru on the line of the clothes rack. He even saw faint points of light shimmering on the Kabane's body, and a faint fragrance wafted towards him. However, there was no soap or detergent in Hinamoto at the moment, so it was difficult for him to describe exactly what kind of fragrance it was. It's actually smiling. Dr. Xiaowai walked forward and tightly gripped the cold iron bar, staring at the Kabane's expression. How is it, Minister Tsuru? Director Fritz also asked with a nervous expression. Marshal Raymond and Sakazuki, on the other hand, were calm. Will no once it dries and is taken down? As she spoke, Tsuru grabbed the Kabane, which had turned into clothing, and shook it vigorously in front of her. With a crisp snap, the Kabane's body instantly recovered, and it plopped down onto the cold ground, staring blankly at its palm. After a moment, under everyone's gaze, it slowly raised its head, looked at Tsuru's beautiful face, and asked, "Where is this place?" Wow! It worked. Group leader Ron and several senior researchers from the Biochemical Research Institute cheered. Director Fritz also had a look of relief, while Dr. Xiaowai remained in a petrified state. Hungry, so hungry, ho-eh, but before they could be happy for a few seconds, the seemingly recovered Kabane stared at Minister Tsuru's neck with a hungry, ferocious expression, and then pounced like a wild beast, baring its fangs and claws. Thud, a dull heavy sound rang out, and the Kabane was instantly sent flying back, smashing into the wall at the other end of the prison cell. Tsuru slowly lowered her raised right foot, then walked out of the prison cell and softly said to Director Fritz, "It seems its desire for blood wasn't washed away. But this isn't surprising. My ability only wash away the evil on a person's heart, but the creature instinct for food cannot be affected." The latter reaction quickly and immediately shouted to group leader Ron, "Bring the blood over quickly." Yes. Soon, a white box containing a blood bag was brought over. They took out the blood bag, poured it into a small basin, placed it inside the prison cell, and quickly came out. Blood-hungry the next moment, the Kabane, smelling the blood, slammed the nearby wall and fell out of the dent. It crawled frantically to the basin with a crazed look and gulped down the blood. Tsuru wasn't surprised to see that the Kabane she had kicked was still able to move. She hadn't used much force anyway. After all, if she kicked it to death, she'd have to find another Kabane to wash, which would be too troublesome. It seems its autonomy has indeed recovered, but it's being affected by the Kabinari virus within its body due to extreme hunger. Dr. Fritz roughly understood the situation when he saw it could still speak human language. Now, they just had to wait for it to drink its fill. Just like that, the people outside the prison cell quietly watched as the Kabane drank all the blood in the small basin. However, the blood stains covering its mouth and the drops of blood dripping down its chin onto its chest and the ground looked terrifying. Fortunately, none of them were ordinary people, so this kind of scene was nothing worth mentioning. Are you done drinking? If you're done, answer the questions. Do you still remember your name? Director Fritz couldn't help but ask. This. My name is Oiwakurasu. Excuse me, where is this? And I'm not dead? The young people, who looked to be in his 20s, looked around with a confused expression. You became a Kabane, but now we have restored your consciousness. You are now a half-human, half-Kabane Kabinari, ha 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 ha. After speaking, Director Fritz could no longer contain the joy in his heart and burst into laughter. After laughing, he ignored the other party and turned to look at Tsuru. Through the experiment, it has been proven that your ability can indeed help Kabane regain consciousness. However, we also know that with your identity and status, it's impossible for you to waste time on these ordinary Kabane. Chapter 198, The Limit of the Kabinari Virus. Led by a director of the Biochemical Research Institute, an administrative department senior director, and 3 military admirals. A group of several researchers and Cypherpol member agents led by Steve Gus, who were responsible for security, slowly arrived outside a prison cell whose bars were made entirely of sea stone. Marshal Raymond glanced at the situation inside and asked, "Is this the new you mentioned that can destroy a street with one blow? Why are there 2, and they're both women?" Director Fritz was in a pleasant mood, his face full of smiles. The one on the left is the new captured by Vice Admiral Crocodile. I've named it Blue Heart, and it's naturally wild. The one next to it is an artificially created new form when Mima Amatori injected Dr. Shawai's black blood into a homeland Kabinari. Its name is said to be Mekko. Besides that, in the Hunter Guard's Katetsugyo, we also found a news heart. They fed it the blood of hundreds of Kabane to ensure its activity. Dr. Shawai nodded and briefly introduced the origin of this special heart. Because the news combat power is too dangerous, we found a place to gather a large number of Kabane to cultivate a core. Then, when it had just formed small-scale black smoke, we used cannons and mortars to defeat it, and then stripped out this heart that emitted blue light, using it as the source of raw materials for manufacturing black blood. However, besides this, I haven't found any other method of utilization. Saying this, he could only shake head, feeling quite helpless. After listening to Dr. Shawai, Director Fritz smiled at Minister Tsuru and said, "Could I please ask you to perform wash heart on the Mekko on the right first?" In his opinion, Mekko was just an appetizer. The experiment of injecting black blood into blue heart later was the main course. Okay. Tsuru naturally agreed. Her main mission this time was to cooperate with the Biochemical Research Institute's experiment. Visiting the scenery of the other world was secondary. Please wait a moment. Quickly put the blood basin in. Director Fritz instructed Group Leader Ron and the others so that Mekko and the others could drink their fill immediately after waking up, preventing the previous accident from happening again. Yes, Director Fritz. This time the researchers were well prepared. They quickly took out the blood bags and poured them into the blood basin. When the basin was filled with bright red liquid emitting a bloody smell, they placed it about 3 or 4 meters away from them. Hoo-hoo. As expected, when the dense blood aura permeated the prison cell, Blue Heart and Mekko instantly opened their pitch-black pupils, which glowed with a hint of blue light. Their faces contorted in struggle as they thrashed violently. However, the sea stone chains binding their wrists and ankles were tightly connected to the iron chair beneath them, rendering any attempt to move meaningless. But as new, they possessed their own special means. Whoosh 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 whoosh, with rapid sounds tearing through the air, streams of viscous silk thread as black as oil shot out from their bodies. As these strings shot into the blood basin, they began to wriggle and devour the blood within. This scene aroused the interest of the 3 military admirals. Even Sakazuki slightly raised his chin. Is it a special talent similar to certain races? He clearly recalled the minority races on the home sea star. As the blood in the blood basin was completely sucked dry, the black strings suddenly began to dissolve themselves, leaving not even a speck of residual dust, as if they had vaporized. Under these circumstances, Tsuru walked into the prison cell alone. She then walked in front of Mekko and looked over the woman before her, surprised to find that the girl's face was actually very beautiful. Tsuru was already 52 years old this year, one could say she was of grandmother age. However, the physique of people on Planet C was just like this. Most only started developing wrinkles from 50 years old, began looking like elderly people from 60, and at 70, their hair turned completely white and teeth fell out. Therefore, her appearance and figure were not greatly affected now, and she looked like a beautiful aunt in her 30s or 40s. Poor child. With a benevolent gaze, Tsuru gently extended her hand and stroked Mekko's face, which was trying to bite her, a few times. Then, she activated the wash fruit ability. As a refreshing radiance carrying a fragrance appeared, Mekko's body first flattened like a paper person, and a moment later, it recovered. This process, which seemed magical yet was very simple, made the contortion on Mekko's face calm down. When she opened her eyes again, although her pupils were still black and glowing with blue light, the gaze looking at Tsuru was much more lively. However, she seemed to be lost in some memory. After about 5 or 6 breaths, Mekko, who had short golden hair, actually stared blankly at Tsuru before her and said, "Mother?" Tsuru raised her eyebrows in surprise. But the next moment, Mekko seemed to have come back to her senses. Looking at the unfamiliar environment around her, she asked nervously, "Ah no, that's not right. Where is this? Where is Lord Biba?" It seems after these Kabane regained consciousness, their memories are all stuck at the time before they became Kabane. Director Fritz said easily, then smiled at Dr. Shawai and said, "You are old acquaintances with her, just explain the situation to her." Okay. Dr. Shawai quickly walked in. Mekko saw that there was finally someone she knew, and her mood gradually calmed down. Immediately, the former leaned into the latter's ear and briefly and clearly explained the recent matters. Has Lord Biba already joined them? After listening, Mekko felt a mix of emotions. Although it was the other party who personally injected her with black blood, pushing her into the abyss of death, she was actually willingly sacrificing herself for his purpose. Because, she loved Mima Amatori. Although the latter disdained her love, and even cast it aside like worn-out shoes. Since that's the case, then I'll join too, is that okay? Dr. Shawai was very happy with Mekko's attitude. Ever since coming here, He always felt lonely. It was truly because everyone around him was from other worlds, and this made him start wanting more compatriots to enter the world government, so that they could look after each other in the future. Gus, you and Meko are both new. Just leave her to your cipher, Paul. Senior Director Addison said in a deep voice. Okay, but I still need to inform Captain Rasky. Steve Gus agreed with a smile, then walked into the prison cell, took out a key, and unlocked Meko's handcuffs and leg cuffs. My name is Steve Gus. I am a member of Cipher Pol 9 agent. Let's go, we'll go outside first. Okay. Meko behaved very obediently, feeling like she was back to following Mima Amatori's orders, which also made her feel more at ease. Director Fritz saw Dr. Shawai and the other two walk out, and rubbed his hands together excitedly. He smiled at Tsuru, who remained inside, and said, Minister Tsuru, next, we will inject black blood into Blue Heart. We'll see what happens when the Kabinari virus is further strengthened based on the new. Then I'll trouble you again to help wash away its rioting mind. Tsuru heard this, and raised her eyebrows. Her dark blue ponytail behind her head swayed as she smiled curiously. A further evolved version of the new form Kabane? That's an interesting idea. Yes, we want to see what the limit of the Kabinari virus is like. Director Fritz laughed loudly, his gaze carrying the fanaticism belonging to a biochemical scientist. Chapter 199, The Perfect Form of the New Warrior. Please. Yes. A junior researcher walked into the prison cell holding a white box containing black blood, then opened the lid and took out an injector containing a black liquid with a blue tint. Then, under the watchful eye of Minister Tsuru nearby, he injected it into Blue Heart's chest and slowly pushed it in. The radiance emanating from the heart illuminated his face with a blue glow. A large amount of pitch-black slime overflowed from where the injector was inserted. Its blood vessels and heart visibly changed, gradually turning from bright blue to bright purple. Boom, the moment Blue Heart's pupils completely turned purple, a surging blue-purple mental fluctuation erupted from its body. The researcher swept by it at close range instantly became terrified, as if he had seen the most horrifying sight of his life. At this moment, however, no one paid attention to his situation. Tsuru, also at close range, had her hair blown wildly, and her gaze simultaneously sharpened. Conqueror's Haki? No, it's somewhat similar, but the deterrent strength isn't very strong. Instead, it carries a spirit of fear so thick it's nauseating. Without Haki protecting one's will. She subconsciously glanced at the researcher beside her, who was already trembling and collapsed on the ground, with wet stains rapidly appearing on his pants. This scene was naturally noticed by everyone outside the prison cell. However, Dr. Fritz, Dr. Shawai, and the other researchers, who were weaker in strength, seemed completely unaffected. Upon closer inspection, it turned out there was an invisible chi wall blocking the mental fluctuation that surged like sea waves. Humphrey, the mental power is quite good. Marshal Raymond, with his arms crossed, chuckled softly. His gaze towards Blue Heart also gradually grew fervent. In his opinion, if this thing could truly be mass-produced, it would definitely raise the combat strength level of the middle and lower ranks of the Army headquarters. Although he seemed to have accepted his demotion to Army Marshal on the surface, he was actually quite unwilling in his heart. However, there was nothing he could do about the Five Elders' decision. Therefore, he now only wanted to improve the strength of the Army headquarters, catch up to the Marine headquarters as quickly as possible, or even surpass them. Thus, he was very interested in anything that could contribute to the Army's combat power. Minister Tsuru, quickly wash away its negative mind. Director Fritz shouted a reminder towards the inside. Actually, he didn't need to say it. Tsuru was already preparing to act. However, Blue Heart had previously witnessed the process of Meko being Wash Heart. This caused the Kabinari virus within Blue Heart, strengthened by the black blood, to perceive the strange changes in another host. Therefore, they subconsciously regarded Tsuru's presence as a huge threat. Since it was a threat, Blue Heart, whose consciousness had been completely invaded by the virus, immediately reacted by attacking. It erupted with far more viscous black silk all over its body than when it drank blood before, then transformed into dense hardened spikes covering Tsuru from head to toe. Meanwhile, the young researcher still lost in fear on the ground was pierced with blood holes in the blink of an eye, becoming the first person from the Sea Star world to be sacrificed in the Kabinari world. Be careful. Director Fritz's face turned pale with fright. If Minister Tsuru suffered any accident because of their experiment, he would absolutely be held accountable. Rumble. The viscous black silk condensed and became like clumps of fluffy needle grass filling the entire prison cell. However, because the cell door was blocked by Marshal Raymond's emission of armament Haki, no matter how much they squeezed, they couldn't shake this chi wall in the slightest. But the walls on the other sides didn't have this skill. The left wall, right wall, back wall, and even the roof were completely shattered by these black spikes, and brilliant sunlight immediately poured down from above. Woo 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 woo, such a huge commotion here naturally attracted the attention of the entire Shishikari base. The piercing alarm sound was triggered. The army soldiers standing guard or patrolling nearby quickly gathered towards the Biochemical Research Institute. At the same time, Man in Black rapidly moved across the wooden building rooftops. It escaped. As the ground full of black spikes automatically decomposed, Zhuang Wei, Meko, and the others finally saw the situation inside clearly. The iron chairs they had been sitting on before had completely turned into scrap iron, and a puddle of blurred flesh and blood lay there, asserting its presence. Minister Tsuru. Director Fritz looked at Tsuru with surprise and joy. She stood in the court, unharmed, looking up at the sky above. At her feet were completely limp black threads, looking utterly incapable of hardening. Up there. Sakazuki's gaze also looked at the sky. Receiving the reminder, Director Fritz and the others quickly looked up and indeed discovered Blue Heart's whereabouts. At this moment, she had leaped into midair with her back to the clear blue sky and white clouds. Her entire body was covered in a layer of black armor with terrifying spikes, and a bright purple-blue halo emanated from her. However, the sea-stone handcuffs on her hands and feet were still there. But this wasn't the most astonishing part. The pitch-black strings extending from her body, as they retracted, pulled out a large number of kabane. It turned out, Blue Heart had not only pierced through her own prison cell but also pierced through all the prison cells on both sides, then strung all the kabane together like candied hawthorn skewers. It's going to condense a black smoke for itself. Director Fritz immediately realized what it was going to do and quickly said to Marshal Raymond beside him. We must stop Blue Heart quickly. No need. Marshal Raymond shook head, and smiled. Isn't this a good opportunity? This old man hopes its performance is a bit better, don't disappoint us. While they were speaking, Blue Heart had already attached hundreds of kabane to itself, quickly forming a black smoke over 10 meters tall. However, this black smoke was unlike ordinary black smoke where individual kabane could still be seen. Instead, it had completely condensed into a single entity, becoming an armored giant with a metallic sheen. Bright purple light also emanated from its chest and eye areas. Its left arm seemed to have transformed into a massive black cannon barrel, while its right hand had become a huge black long saber. Moreover, both the cannon barrel and the blade were covered with vein-like veins emitting purple light. The coolest part was that two thin dragonfly wings, completely formed by light purple light and shadow, had generated on its neck. Is this the strongest, most perfect form of the kabane? Dr. Shawai excitedly raised his hands, gazing at Blue Heart with fascination. Steve, Gus and Meko, who were also Kabanrai in the new form nearby, were equally shocked, wondering if they also possessed this kind of strength potential. Oh, it looks like a black-skinned giant race wearing armor and holding a ship cannon and a great saber. Marshal Raymond chuckled cheerfully. He was not affected by the tense atmosphere around him in the slightest. Sakazuki beside him merely watched with an expressionless face. At the same time, a large number of army soldiers and man in black belonging to Cypher Paul had also arrived at the scene. The former immediately pulled the trigger on their gun, aiming at the giant black armor warrior without a word. Their duty was to protect the safety of the base. Blue Heart's act of destruction was already enough to warrant immediate opening fire. Da-da-da-da-da, a large amount of gunfire flash erupted from the muzzles of the heavy assault rifles. Large caliber bullets poured out like heavy rain, and some people even brought rocket launchers. Chapter 200, Great Lava Eruption Appearing in Another World. Bang. 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 Mortar shells shot out from the gun barrels one by one. Compared to the bullets that could only cause fleeting sparks on the surface of Blue Heart, their impact was significantly greater. Explosions of paddle wheel-like flames appeared, creating a much more spectacular scene. However, when the smoke and fire from the first round of bombardment dissipated, they found that the pitch-black giant, marked with streaks of purple light, was completely unharmed. Instead, the latter raised its left hand, aimed the massive gun barrel at a team of army soldiers still firing intensely nearby, and shot out an energy bullet entirely composed of a purple light mass. In the blink of an eye, with a loud noise, the ground beneath their feet was shattered and pulverized along with them. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Meanwhile, the 6 powers experts from Cypher Paul took action. These men in black in suits and leather boots continuously used moonwalk, rapidly darting around the pitch-black giant. To be honest, they had considerable experience dealing with opponents of such large body size, having fought Sea Kings, Giant Race, and others to varying degrees. In short, don't confront them head-on, simply use mobility to harass. Tempest Kick, Chaos. Tempest Kick, Line. In midair, 7 or 8 men in black chose to unleash sharp vacuum slashes, while another group of men in black chose to circle around to its neck. Finger Pistol, Spot. Finger Gun, Yellow Lotus. For a time, streaks of bright blue crescent-shaped vacuum slashes and dense finger pistol after images bombarded various parts of Blueheart's body. Coupled with the continuous bullet rain and mortar shells, the pitch-black giant was completely enveloped by countless attack methods. The fierce explosion flames and vacuum slashes actually forced Blueheart to retreat step by step, each step cracking the ground beneath it. Enraged, it frantically swung the huge black scimitar in its right hand, attempting to cleave these mosquitoes that were hurting it to death. But the men in black were most skilled at dodging, and not a single one was hit by the seemingly dangerous blade. Boom! Suddenly, a somewhat dazzling purple radiance erupted from the pitch-black giant's body, followed by a flood-like mental fluctuation that swept across the entire area. The men in black who were hit at close range immediately stopped moving. Ah! No! Don't come over! What is this thing? The next moment, screams filled with extreme fear erupted from their mouths. These members from Cypher Pol 7 actually made the most unsightly move in combat, fleeing uncontrollably. However, before they could run far, they were swatted away by the sweeping giant blade. Only the men in black who were behind it successfully created distance. What do you think? Marshal Raymond glanced at the army soldiers not far away, who also seemed affected, their faces pale, looking at the pitch-black giant in terror. Sakazuki, standing a step behind him with a grim face, watched the seemingly imposing Blueheart. Hearing the former's question, he said, whether it was the black threads before or the layer of black armor on the surface, it's clearly a product of mental power condensation, equivalent to our armament hockey. This means it's currently in a state of full-body armament hockey hardening. From its aura, the intensity isn't high, probably similar to beginners who have just mastered it. However, according to Director Fritz's previous introduction, this Cabane, called New, can temporarily utilize the mental power of other Cabane when forming black smoke. So the strength level of the black armor is likely related to the number of Cabane gathered. And that mental fluctuation is very similar to Conqueror's hockey, but its effect is more focused on inducing fear on a psychological level. It's indeed difficult for those with insufficient will to resist. Just as he finished speaking, Director Fritz added, those black viscous substance before were indeed pure mental power condensation products, but the current black armor is not. Notice the purple light patterns on the black armor, like blood vessels. They look exactly like the Cabineri heart membrane. This means that layer of black armor is actually composed of a large number of Cabane bodies, heart membranes, plus the black viscous substance. It's a fusion of substance and spirit. After hearing their opinions, Marshal Raymond thoughtfully stroked his stubbled chin and smiled. So, if it's given enough Cabane, it can create an even more powerful pitch-black giant, one that comes with armament hockey and fear-type Conqueror's hockey? Oh, and the ability to freely transform weapon forms and fire energy cannonballs. At this point, Dr. Shawai nodded and said excitedly. Yes, we still don't know the scale limit of the black smoke. Wow! Marshal Raymond looked at Blueheart's massive black body with surprise, then ordered Sakazuki. It's caused enough trouble, let it rest for a bit. Have Minister Tsuru brainwash it. We need a more intelligent war beast. Sakazuki nodded silently upon hearing this, then took long strides in his crimson trousers and gleaming black leather boots, walking towards the still rampaging pitch-black giant with a seemingly slow but actually fast pace. Leaving it to you, Army Admiral Akanyu. As he walked past Minister Tsuru, he heard a teasing remark from her. However, the former had no sense of humor and replied in a deep voice, duty calls. Tsuru watched Sakazuki's black coat of justice sway in the strong wind, sighing in her heart. The era is changing so fast. Sakazuki's legs rapidly transformed into flowing magma under the wide-eyed gaze of Dr. Shawai and others. Suddenly, not only did the surrounding temperature begin to rise, but a strong sulfur smell also permeated the air. Boom! The next moment, a huge explosive jet sound echoed throughout the area. In an instant, Sakazuki had transformed into a flying fire meteor flying towards high altitude. The speed of that eruption was simply astonishing. This Admiral Akanyu's ability is the Logia system Magmag fruit, and his most powerful volcanic eruption can spray large amounts of volcanic ash to high altitude over 45 kilometers in a short time. Therefore, his eruption speed in reality is far from the slow and sluggish depiction in the anime. It can be said that he is a humanoid supernatural volcano. Such an astonishing commotion from Sakazuki was naturally noticed by Blueheart immediately. At this moment, countless Cabineri viruses within its body felt a strong sense of crisis and fear. Being inherently skilled at playing with fear, they didn't hesitate to trust the fear they felt, urging Blueheart to immediately unleash its strongest means. Click click click, its body began to deform rapidly. The blade on its right hand quickly transformed into a gun barrel identical to the one on its left hand. At the same time, more black viscous silk threads surged from its back, transforming one after another into black gun barrels glowing with purple light. In this instant, The pitch-black giant's body suddenly sported 6 super-large caliber gun barrels and countless muzzles. Their shape was quite similar to steam guns, and they were all aimed at the charging meteor flame head-on. Buzz! The next second, all the gun barrels and muzzles glowed with an even brighter purple light internally. It was concentrating most of its mental energy into the attack power of this wave. Hey, seeing this scene, Sakazuki merely snorted coldly, showing no intention of avoiding it. He directly used element transformation on his right hand as well. Immediately, thick black smoke and gunfire flash soared into the sky. Great Eruption. Chapter 201, The Washed Out Evil of the Heart. Countless purple light energy bullets poured out from those hundreds of large and small black cannon barrels, forming an overwhelming visual effect in the sky above the base. They were like a dreamy aurora, attracting the attention of all the creatures on Ojika Peninsula. While this scene was beautiful, thinking of the power of a single shot being enough to destroy a street, Director Fritz and Dr. Shawai both felt a chill in their hearts. Blue Heart used its full power attack to show what is called Kabane's Wrath, what is called bullets raining down, and beams filling the sky. Great Eruption. Just then, following a shout filled with oppressive feeling, a lava giant fist completely formed by viscous magma, carrying rolling heat waves, thick smoke, and surging gunfire flash, smashed towards the upper body of the pitch-black giant like a 3-story building. Boom 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 boom. Large amounts of energy beams, like a surging purple light waterfall, bombarded the surface of the magma fist wave after wave. Every collision would produce deafening explosions and scorching shock waves. Fortunately, the clash between the two sides took place in the air, otherwise all the buildings inside the base would face the consequence of rebuilding. Hey roar. Suddenly, that pitch-black giant roared, but in this sound seemed to carry extreme shock and fear, because it discovered that the stream of energy bullets it poured out simply could not stop the magma fist's relentless advance. That which looked like a purple light like a waterfall or great river was being pushed back with overwhelming force by the lava mass emitting rolling black smoke, at a speed visible to the naked eye. Sakazuki used this ordinary fist to tell Blue Heart what is called the fragility and powerlessness of flashy things facing simplicity, and what is called ruthless suppression on a level of absolute strength. Boom! The giant fist, 10 meters high and 5 or 6 meters wide, flowing with thick magma, heavily smashed onto the pitch-black giant's face and chest. The large amount of air around the two suddenly exploded, releasing waves of visible air current and gale. The latter was like being heavily struck by an iron hammer. That huge body, like a rag, was thrown a distance of hundreds of meters, flying over the roofs of all the buildings along the way, smashing into a hill outside the base, and in the blink of an eye was swallowed by countless rocks and flowing magma. Did Sakazuki go a bit too far? This old man didn't tell him to kill the person. Marshal Ryman complained speechlessly upon seeing this scene. Cough cough, it probably won't die. According to Dr. Shawai's understanding of Nu, these Nu have quite strong self-healing ability. Even if their limbs are cut off, they can recover in a short amount of time. Basically, as long as their head and heart are fine, there won't be any big problems. Director Fritz, who had recovered from his shock, explained to him. He is after all the dean of the World Government Biochemical Research Institute. Although surprised by Sakazuki's strength, it wasn't to the extent of having his 3 views destroyed. On the contrary, that Dr. Shawai and Mekko looked like they were completely petrified, and seemed to still need some time to react. It's on fire. Quick, someone put out the fire. At this time, following the fierce collision that splattered outwards, magma rained down like rain. That terrifying high-temperature landing on the houses quickly ignited raging flames. Ah, this. Senior Director Addison smiled wryly, sweeping his gaze around. Just by simple visual estimation, he could feel that the losses this time would not be small. Admiral Akanu caused destruction that was much greater than that Blue Heart. However, he also knew that if they didn't stop it in time and let that pitch-black giant rampage freely, this base would 100% turn into a pile of ruins. Let's go, take a look. Marshal Ryman was now greatly interested and quickly hurried towards the direction Blue Heart and Sakazuki flew out. Minister Tsuru and others beside him naturally followed closely. Outside the base. Bang! A pitch-black giant hand with a surface flowing with magma pushed away the large rocks pressing on its body. But that black giant did not stand up. Instead, it emitted waves of mournful screams, roaring and rolling on the ground, frantically swatting at the masses of magma and flames on its body. According to the Biochemical Research Institute's previous research and tests, black smoke is not a fragile sandcastle piled up by Cabane, but is an existence solidified into one body under the effect of viscous silk thread. For Nu it serves as the core, the body outside its body is actually no different from its body. Suffering damage will make it feel pain just the same. And now, Sakazuki's viscous acidic magma, tightly adhered to the surface of its body, flowed relentlessly over it, naturally causing it bone-piercing burning pain. Although the coronavirus itself comes with a certain high-temperature resistance, it's not immunity after all. Facing this kind of supernatural special magma, that bit of resistance is simply not worth mentioning. And that pitch-black surface which carried a certain armament hockey hardening effect, just like Sakazuki said before, its strength was only comparable to a novice who just mastered hockey. How could it be his opponent? Hey, having no other choice, Blueheart had no choice but to actively separate the outer layer of its body surface. It really couldn't stand this heart-piercing pain and quickly abandoned the black smoke body, leaping out from its head. Just as it was about to follow its instinct and escape, it discovered that Sakazuki, maintaining the form of magma in his lower body, like a god or demon, was floating in midair, waiting for it, and that pair of terrifying, indescribable gaze was coldly staring at it. Blueheart's current consciousness had long been eroded and occupied by the coronavirus. But even so, under the urge of instinct, it still fearfully and nervously stopped its movements, not daring to make the slightest rash move, because the mental energy inside its body was basically used up, and it simply did not have the ability to start another fierce battle. It was obvious that its intelligence was better than low-level Kabane, or even ordinary Nu. Beneath its feet was piles of Kabane corpses which had already reverted back into Kabane, being constantly burned and devoured by scorching magma, turning into raging flames burning all around. This situation and scene, facing such an opponent, could only be described as a desperate situation. "Leave it to me, Sakazuki." As a pleasant voice sounded, Tsuru, at a speed difficult for ordinary people's naked eyes to detect, silently appeared behind Blueheart. That pair of eyes filled with mature woman charm unhappily swept a gaze over the surrounding flames. It seemed she really disliked this kind of scorching, dirty environment. Immediately, the high heels on her feet lightly stepped, and instantly a circle of water vapor carrying a fresh fragrance spread out, washing clean everything within a radius of tens of meters, including the Kabane, magma, and flames. Regarding this, Sakazuki naturally had no opinion, cancelled his element transformation, and landed back on the ground. Hey, his Blueheart, seeing that it was this woman who made it uncomfortable again, although the spirit ability inside its body was basically used up, but relying on its remaining stamina and bloodthirsty instinct, still with a ferocious expression, charged forward. "Be good, child." But this kind of action from it, in Tsuru's eyes, was somewhat like a child making noise. Her fair and tender right hand lightly waved and touched Blueheart's face. After a soft swishing sound, the latter instantly turned into a sparkling clothing in Tsuru's hand. Its originally terrifying expression also became peaceful. "Oh, this child is really quite dirty. Washed out so much filth." Minister Tsuru looked in surprise at the bubble floating before her eyes. One could see inside this bubble floated a mass of purplish black smoke. It was precisely the evil that had just been washed out from the heart of Blueheart. Chapter 202, The Man Who Will Be the Sea Transport King. The conquest process in the Kubenrai world was in full swing, nearing its end, while the world government's actions on the Sea Star mainland were becoming increasingly frequent, gradually attracting wider influence and attention. North Blue, Spider Miles Island. The landscape here seemed unaffected by the outside world, with chimneys still standing tall, emitting black smoke. Large factories occupied most of the zone inside the city. Tens of thousands of workers were contributing to the world's weapon manufacturing plant with their sweat, pocketing stacks of Bailey banknotes, and watching sea ships loaded with various weapons set sail, providing timely assistance to kingdoms in urgent need of handy weapons. Whenever they thought of the poor people who could only resolve conflicts with their bare hands becoming fully armed with their help, every worker here felt genuine joy and pride. Today, they helped another group of people freely enjoy daily gunfights. "I'm the one at the sail, I'm the master of my sea, oh, my destiny is mine to control, the sea of souls is steered by me, the master of my sea, wahoo, I have my own vast sea and sky." Waves of rhythmic music, accompanied by soaring vocals, echoed inside and outside the Don Quixote family's base. The sound source clearly came from the uppermost room, and the volume of the visual Den Mushi projection must have been turned up to the maximum. And that was exactly the case. Da Flamengo, wearing a pink feathered coat, sat on the sofa, grinning as he watched the skeleton man on the screen passionately singing while holding an electric guitar. This was the world government's live broadcast of the celebration concert at Tequila Wolf. This stylishly dressed skeleton man, under the stage name Soul King, made his official debut with the song Believe after Tesoro's program. Fa-fa-fa-fa-foo, this guy looks much more pleasing to the eye, and his songs are better too. In this world severely lacking in entertainment, the world superstar plan promoted by the propaganda department, combined with repeated public broadcasts, could be said to have brought great surprises to the citizens of the world nations. The songs, which could be called masterpieces, coupled with incredibly lavish performance scenes, swept through everyone's heart like an invisible typhoon. Even a big shot from the underworld like Doflamingo was no exception, though for some reason he didn't really like Tesoro. However, he really liked Stella. If she hadn't become a world reporter for the propaganda department now, he would have wanted to find an opportunity to capture her and have her massage his legs or something. And now, the propaganda department had finally launched another world superstar, whose appearance and song style both suited his taste perfectly. Doflamingo had already decided to find a tape recorder to save this song Believe. Doffy. Treble, who had knocked on the door several times from outside, finally couldn't stand it anymore and pushed the door open, which finally caught Doflamingo's attention. Everyone has arrived. Is that so? The latter nodded upon hearing this, casually turned off the visual den mushy on the coffee table in front of him, then stood up from the sofa. Humming a tune, he strode with his long legs to the meeting room downstairs. At this time, the room was already filled with the current cadres of the Don Quixote family. Diamante, Virgo, Senior, Jorah, and McVise were all present. Of course, there were also some recently joined mid-level cadres. When Treble walked in and returned to his position, the meeting convened by Doflamingo for all cadres officially began. Doffy, where's Pika? Diamante, who had just returned from outside, looked at the empty chair opposite him and asked in confusion. I sent him out, he won't be back for a short period of time. Doflamingo sat in the main seat, arrogantly crossed his legs, and grinned. So that's it. Diamante didn't ask any more questions. The reason I called you here this time is to tell everyone that I've decided to establish an express company. Its main business will be providing sea transport services for various countries, including weapons, soldiers, materials, and even ordinary goods. As long as it's a large quantity or expensive goods that need to cross the sea, they'll have to come to us. Doflamingo got straight to the point, throwing out the main topic, which unsurprisingly caused surprise and confusion among everyone. Doffy, although I don't know why you suddenly want to do express delivery, you should know that the sea transport business has great difficulty. It requires not only a large number of skilled seamen and various ships, but also the ability to ensure that the goods are delivered to the recipient intact and within the specified time. And now most of the sea transport is controlled by deep-sea current it. Even the weapons we've manufactured need to be sent to the buyers through them. This person is known as the Sea Transport King in the underworld. If we intervene in this industry. Speaking up to this point, Treble looked at his young master with a troubled expression and asked. Doffy, are you prepared for a confrontation with this Sea Transport King who is currently rising in prominence? They knew their own situation. Their Don Quixote family could only be considered a relatively famous newcomer in the underworld, while this Sea Transport King was an established major influence. It was said to be a family with a long history of 200 years, who had been deeply cultivating the world's sea transport business. Strictly speaking, Sea Transport King didn't refer to a single person, but to the family itself. Deep Sea Current was the exclusive title of successive family heads. Fa-fa-fa-fa-foo, the stronger the opponent, the more interesting it is. It's also time for someone else to wear this Sea Transport King hat. Doflamingo grinned and sneered. Manpower, ships, even sea charts, you don't need to worry. When the time comes for them to be available, they naturally will be. What we need to do now is find their major strongholds in the North Blue, take over the business here first, and then withstand the retaliation that follows. It would be best if we could find this generation's deep-sea current. Seeing that he had truly made his decision, everyone tacitly stopped trying to dissuade him and instead thought about Doflamingo's words. For them, the Don Quixote family's development strategy had begun to shift. Although everyone was very confused about what exactly happened. Doffy, finding their sea transport strongholds isn't difficult, but finding this Sea Transport King is too difficult. It's not like no influence has tried to encirclement and suppression him after he appeared in a certain place, but each time he would strangely disappear from the sea surface, and appear the next day in a certain kingdom in another sea area. Virgo frowned and stated the difficulty. Actually, Doflamingo had heard a little about this point as well, but there was nothing he could do. That lord above had personally issued instructions, demanding that he secretly hand over the weapon manufacturing plant under his command to the administrative department's industrial division, and then establish a sea transport company to take over the world's sea transport, and while he was at it, look for the Sea Transport King's headquarters position. In addition to this, he also learned about Rosamund's situation. Regarding this biological younger brother who suddenly went missing back then, Doflamingo actually cherishes him quite a bit. After all, no matter what, he was his only remaining bloodline family, and he was a character who valued family greatly. Of course, people who have betrayed him are no longer family. Doflamingo was immersed in his thoughts, then glanced at all the great readers present, grinned and laughed. Fa-fa-fa-fa-foo, I'm definitely going to be the Sea Transport King. Who agrees? Who opposes? Chapter 203, Saint Shepherd Jupiter's Doubt. In the Holy Land Mary Ejos, within the room of authority in Pangaea Castle, the 5 elders were gathered together yet again. To be honest, the number of meetings they had held this year was somewhat frequent. In the past, there weren't so many matters, everyone handled their own affairs and enjoyed peaceful times. Actually, from an official standpoint, this type of meeting has a very formal name, the Supreme Executive Committee, because the official title of the 5 elders is Supreme Executive Committee member. In addition, there are 5 ministers of affairs, the dean of the 5 great branches, and 5 chiefs of staff, who together form this department representing the world's highest authority. The ministers of affairs are essentially 5 elders candidate, so sometimes the positions are filled, and sometimes they are empty, depending entirely on when Lord Imu designates the candidate. The 5 great branches dean are responsible for the practical affairs of the political affairs department, the judiciary, the proclamation government institute, the supreme military command, and the cipher pol headquarters, acting like general managers. After all, the big shot couldn't possibly sit at their desks personally burying themselves in countless documents, could they? The 5 chiefs of staff, on the other hand, serve as the 5 elders' secretary general. They need to manage their subordinate secretaries to relay the 5 elders' various order to the dean of each branch and manage the directly subordinate department that is not under the jurisdiction of the 5 great branches. Although these individuals are nominally qualified to attend such supreme meetings, in reality, no one would awkwardly intrude unless the 5 elders called them over to listen. Unless the 5 elders called them over to listen. The situation in the Kabinari world is basically clear. There is nothing that can threaten our combat power. Only the Kabinari virus needs attention, we must not let it spread here. Saint Topman Warkuri, as usual, was the first to speak and preside over the meeting. His expression remained meticulous, giving off a very serious feeling. So for the next matter, we can act more freely. First, occupy Kongakaku and, while we're at it, bring the shogunate under control. Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn, holding Shodai Kaitetsu, seemed to be resting with his eyes closed, but upon hearing the words, he said in a deep voice. We have no problem on our side. Crocodile leading 1,000 elite army soldiers is enough. The key is that your administrative department is too slow. When can you arrive at Hidden Stone's Villigto station? As the highest boss of the 3 forces, he was the 5 elders present who was least intimidated by Saint Topman Warkuri. Only he could speak such words, which were almost accusatory. Saint Topman Warkuri looked over with displeasure. You are only responsible for taking it down and the subsequent garrisoning, while we are responsible for the development of the entire world. Matter in all aspects involves almost all departments. Unified currency, unified legal system, mining resources, product dumping, cultivating farmland, building shipyard, hospital, school, bank, police stations, prison, and the regeneration of Kabane resources. Aren't all these matter the responsibility of our political affairs department? Naturally, we need more preparation time. Hearing this, Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn hadn't said anything yet, but Jaga Ursha Saturn Saint became displeased and reminded him. Law, police stations, prison, these are matter for our judiciary, but they need to wait until your political affairs department's work is done. Ever since the Ministry of Police Affairs gained a basic structure and even acquired Dragon himself to oversee it, this gentleman's posture had straightened considerably, and his speaking voice had become much louder. Including Magellan, Moria, and Tarklama in Impel Down, and waiting a few more years, their judiciary would finally have a group of experts supporting them. Humphrey, anyway, hurry up. Finish dealing with the Kabinari world as soon as possible so Crocodile and Bullet can return quickly. Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn also had his temper. After urging them, he ignored Saint Topman Warkuri, who could only suppress his dissatisfaction speechlessly and began to talk about the topic of this meeting. Regarding the Kabinari world matter, we already made plans before. Our subordinates will naturally carry them out step by step. We just need to wait patiently. What we need to discuss this time is Lord Imu's decision to designate all kingdom in our world as affiliated countries. St. Marcus Mars looked over in confusion. What is there to discuss about this? Wasn't it announced to the world through Stella? That can only be considered an advance notice. The formal official communique hasn't been issued yet. St. Topman Warkuri shook head and sighed. Because there are 2 troublemakers stuck before this communique. Troublemaker? St. Jaga Ursha Saturn opened his eyes. His sharp gaze looked extremely assertive. He cold snorted. Is there anything that can obstruct Lord Imu's order from being implemented? Wano country, Elboth. St. Topman Warkuri expressionlessly stated the names of the 2 countries. Upon hearing this, the room of authority became extremely silent. Everyone, including Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn, frowned and pondered. Once our communique is issued, it means that all kingdom must fulfill the responsibilities and obligations of affiliated countries. The payment of heavenly tribute, obeying the world government's order, and the police system currently being implemented, as well as the unified legal system to be implemented later, and so on. Do you all think these two nations are likely to agree? If they refuse to implement it, what is the significance of our communique? Lord Imu's order will not have been fully implemented. Now everyone understood the tricky part of the matter. Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn was also temporarily speechless. Because these two are both problematic nations with extremely long history and quite strong domestic combat power. First, Wano country. This is the only samurai country in hundreds of years that once caused a marine admiral to die in battle. Moreover, it has always implemented an isolationist policy and never receives outsiders. Coupled with the chaotic and terrifying degree of the sea area's climate, it can even be called the first in the New World. And the high cliff waterfalls make it difficult even for the warship of marine headquarters to break in. From these various geographical environments, it indeed provides excellent conditions for the isolationist policy. Elbaf is even more troublesome. This is the kingdom of the giant race, the world's acknowledged strong nation. It has also always refused affiliation with the world government. Even Sister Carmel, who has the best relationship with the giant race, could only locate the House of Lambs in a small village on the kingdom's edge. Let's solve them one by one. Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn pondered for a moment and made a suggestion. Saint Shepherd Jupiter, sitting across from him, nodded his head agreeably. Let's first discuss Wano country. Relatively speaking, it's easier to handle. But no matter what, we need to first understand its domestic situation. No matter what you do, intelligence comes first. This is a basic quality for the highest boss of an intelligence agency. What, didn't your cipher Paul send people in? St. Marcus Mars looked towards Saint Shepherd Jupiter puzzledly. In his heart, cipher Paul agent were omnipresent ghosts. The latter bitter smile. No, their unique culture, ancient traditional language, and an atmosphere that can be called national exclusion make it almost impossible for people to infiltrate without support from internal higher-ups. Then how did the beast pirates get in? Inferring from Kaido's ability, they should have flown directly in and used force to suppress it, and it was while Kazuki Oden was out at sea. However, this also indirectly proves that there aren't many top-tier combatants guarding the interior of Wano country. This point needs special attention. Speaking of this, Saint Shepherd Jupiter stroked his chin, pondering with great puzzlement. I'm just very curious, why was there no movement at all after Kazuki Oden returned? Shouldn't he have fought a great battle with Kaido? How could he let the latter leave the island casually and come over to get involved with us? It is now 24 years before the plot, and Kurizumi Orochi prepared to establish a weapon factory in Kuri 20 years ago. Therefore, Cypher Paul Zero agent and his weapon trade is matter at least 4 years later. Thus, it is also reasonable that the current world government cannot know the situation in Wano country. Chapter 204, The Prelude to Suppressing Wano country. Perhaps they didn't fight, or perhaps they finished fighting. Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn speculated, gripping his cane. Is it possible that Kazuki Oden has already been defeated by Kaido, either killed in battle or imprisoned? Indeed. Saint Shepherd Jupiter felt this idea made a lot of sense and chuckled. If that's the case, and Kaido has already been captured by us, then Wano country, which appears mysterious and difficult to enter on the surface, is actually very weak inside, with no highest combat power station there at all. These words caused the other 5 elders to show expressions suggesting that's very likely. As mentioned before, if even Kaido with the beast pirates could suppress Wano country, it already indicates that the current Wano country is completely different from Wano country hundreds of years ago. I think we can send someone in to take a look. No need for infiltration, just break in directly and send out the information about the situation inside. Once we confirm our speculation is true, then. A sharp glint flashed in Saint Topman Warcurry's eyes, and he said heavily. We'll conquer this samurai country in one fell swoop? The value of Wano country is considerable: seastone mine, alcohol iron ore, sharp sword, seastone processing technology, and so on. Crucially, it's also the birthplace of the Poneglyph. The problem is, even if Cypher Paul finds out that Wano country is empty inside, who should we send to suppress it? And how can we ensure the fleet can land on the island smoothly? St. Marcus Mars raised the question. Indeed, without confirming whether Kazuki Oden is still there, we need at least one highest combat power to lead the team. But Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn pondered for a moment. The current situation is that the high-level combat power on the military side is also stretched thin. On the marine side, Sengoku has been promoted to Fleet Admiral. Although not officially announced yet, he is definitely not suitable to lead the team personally. Zephyr is still in Drum Kingdom treating his asthma. Garp needs to guard Fishman Island while Aokiji is on the Extreme Ice Continent mission. Although the army has a Kanyo, he hasn't reached the highest combat power level yet. If Kazuki Odin is fine in Wano country and a conflict occurs between the two sides, the former would likely become the second admiral in history to die there. How about sending a holy shield? Saint Topman Warcurry hesitated for a moment before voicing his idea. He felt that this was the only option before Aokiji, Okainu, Kizaru, Bullet, and others fully matured. I do have an idea. At this moment, Jaga Ursha Saturn Saint had a flash of inspiration and grinned. However, the hideous scar on his face made him look even more terrifying. The other four turned their gaze towards this five elder, who usually had the least influence among them. Isn't Kaido imprisoned in Impel Down's infinite hell? We can use Tarklama's pet fruit ability to order him to obey another person's order, and then have that person take Kaido to Wano country. Incidentally, we can have Kaido use his ability to make the fleet fly. Wouldn't that solve all the problems? After hearing his method, everyone's eyes lit up. But can this slave king's ability really do something like that? The distance from Impel Down to Wano country isn't short. Saint Shepherd Jupiter asked doubtfully. He couldn't before awakening, but he has been awakened for many years. Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn said cheerfully. Before awakening, his control over slave could only be done through sound. But after awakening, he can pre-store rules into color. This way, even if the slave leaves his line of sight, they cannot violate his rules. Back then, Tarklama used this awakening ability to set rules for all his soldiers, such as no escaping, no surrendering, must fight with all their might. Saint Topman Warcurry sincerely sighed after hearing this. This ability is truly excellent. It would be even better if it could be used on everyone in the world. How is that possible? Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn chuckled. We all know that devil fruit ability has limits. It is said that Tarklama once conducted an experiment and could put color on a maximum of 50,000 people. A slave army of 50,000 who absolutely obey order and fight with all their might is also very powerful. Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn looked at him in surprise and suggested. This old man thinks Tarklama's ability is more suitable for war. See if he can be transferred to the army side? These words immediately made the smile on Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn's face disappear, and he chose to refuse without hesitation. No, the pet fruit ability is very suitable for Impel Down. In the future, the prisoner we imprison will definitely include dangerous individuals from other worlds. The effect of sea stone on them is only its sturdiness. But those strange and varied special abilities cannot be suppressed. At this time, a collar is needed to forcibly order them not to resist, escape from prison, or use their abilities. He said this resolutely, leaving no room for discussion, which made Saint Ethenbren Venusjiro show an unpleasant expression and his gaze became stern. The latter didn't expect this junior to speak to him with such a forceful attitude. At this moment, Saint Topman Warcurry spoke up, stopping him from saying anything harsher and continuing to confront Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn. I actually think what he said makes sense. Take the Kubenrai called new in the Kubenrai world, for example. Even if they are shackled by sea stone, they can still resist using sticky black threads and mental fluctuation. This is enough to show that sea stone's effect is only targeted at devil fruit user. Saint Shepherd Jupiter quickly agreed. He also didn't want the atmosphere to become too awkward and chuckled. Let's continue talking about Kaido's matter. I think we can reveal some information about the other world to him. For a guy like Kaido, who is obsessed with war and combat, it will definitely have a fatal temptation. Look at Bullet and Crocodile, aren't they having a great time now? After the consecutive speeches from the two, Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn didn't say much more, just snorted coldly and agreed with a blank expression. Of course, compared to skirmishes within one world, war with thousands upon thousands of worlds and combat against expert are definitely more desirable. Saint Topman Warcurry made the final decision. Since that's the case, let's settle the matter of Wano country like this. I will report this immediately and see Lord Amu's opinion. Since the matter involved Wano country, it definitely needed to be reported to him. Immediately, he picked up the transponder snail on the coffee table and dialed. Soon, an extremely arrogant nasal sound echoed in the room of authority. This single sound instantly made the five elders sit up straight. Even Saint Ethenbren Venusjiro, who had been leaning on the sofa, immediately straightened his body. Lord Amu, regarding the unified affiliation of all kingdoms, it has been hindered due to the relationship between Wano country and Delboff. Therefore, regarding Wano country, we plan to. After about 5 minutes, Saint Topman Warcurry finished explaining the content they had just discussed. After listening, him in the room of authority quickly thought and soon made a decision. Regarding the person who will go to Wano country to lead the suppression, I have already made a decision. You just need to prepare everything, and that person will naturally go there when the time comes. Chapter 205, The Kazuki Problem and the Giant God Soldiers. Plop, he placed the handset back onto the back of the transponder snail. As it closed its eyes and continued resting, Im picked up the red wine, poured himself a glass, and slowly swirled it. Gradually, the fragrance of the liquid spread through the room, a scent he found quite enjoyable. He was certain this particular fondness for red wine was influenced by his previous life. After all, in his previous life, his favorite drink was cola. Speaking of which, he still couldn't understand how cola could be used as energy. He truly hoped that Kid Cudi Flam could develop it soon. Wano country. I remember at this point in time, Kazuki Oden should have started his naked dance, and then next year he'll receive the newspaper about Roger's execution. Because Kazuki Oden started dancing naked, he lost the trust of most of the citizens over the next 5 years, their initial disappointment turning into disgust. But he's only just started dancing. The citizens of Wano country should just be in the stage of disappointment. Sending people to suppress them at this time would be a bit inappropriate. In Im's view, it would be best to wait another 4 or 5 years before going to suppress them. By then, even if Kazuki Oden wanted to lead a rebellion, he would only have the so-called Akazaya 9 by his side. Most of the samurai wouldn't follow him at all. Speaking of which, this Kazuki Oden seems to be part of the open country faction, advocating for the abolition of Wano country's isolationist policy, while Kurizumi Orochi is the stubborn conservative faction, resolutely enforcing the isolationist policy, and doing so even more thoroughly. From this perspective, what Kazuki Oden wants to do actually aligns with the world government's stance. Of course. The premise is that this guy's open country proposal includes affiliation with the world government. Wano country must open its borders, and it must affiliate with the world government. Furthermore, it must be subjected to near-direct control. Therefore, Kurizumi Orochi must be eliminated, but Kazuki Oden cannot be allowed to regain the position of general. Im quickly reviewed the world government's basic attitude towards Wano country in his mind. In his opinion, it would be best to completely eliminate the Kazuki family, the kind of eradication that pulls up the roots, because this family is simply too special. From a historical perspective, they are remnants of the previous dynasty with deep roots, but 800 years have passed. From his perspective as a transmigrator, such a long time having passed isn't a big deal. After all, aren't the descendants of the King dynasty in his previous life living well? But the key is that what they possess is a bit too important. First, the Kazuki clan is a stonemason clan that has processed stone for generations, possessing the technical prowess to process any ore, such as the indestructible poneglyph. From this, they also developed the technology for finely processing sea stone. Second, the Kazuki clan has passed down the ancient text deciphering method for generations, allowing them to read all the content on the poneglyphs, and even freely add a few strokes to the poneglyphs. Finally, there is the inherited secret technique of armament hockey's internal destruction. According to Wano country's tradition, they collectively refer to armament hockey and the techniques for using armament hockey as Ryo, but they can actually distinguish between advanced and basic techniques. When Hyagro taught Luffy, he said that the techniques Rayleigh taught Luffy were actually more advanced than the Ryo he taught. So where did Rayleigh's more advanced Ryo come from? The answer is, it came from Kazuki Oden, or rather, the Kazuki clan's ability to engrave writing on the poneglyphs is armament hockey's internal destruction. When Roger was on Sky Island, he had Oden engrave what he wanted to say on the poneglyph. This is enough to prove that Roger and the others at that time did not know this technique. Because this is a technique passed down through generations by the Kazuki clan. As for the techniques mastered by external experts like Roger and the others, it is Conqueror's hockey coding. Kazuki Oden didn't know about this, which is why he was surprised and shouted, "What is this?" when he was attacked by divine avoidance for the first time. Of course, Im himself knew this armament hockey technique that could attack the inside of substance, but he, or rather, his previous self, did not teach the method to his subordinates. The reason for this is self-evident. This armament hockey internal destruction technique, should I find time to pass it down? After all, we've already embarked on the path of conquering 10,000 worlds, and increasing the world government's high-level combat power is also very necessary. This question made him fall into deep thought and hesitation. Sometimes, having subordinates who are too strong isn't a good thing. Speaking of which, Amazon Lily, which is close by, also has a tradition of armament hockey. It seems they have mastered the coding technique. Never mind, let's think about the Kazuki clan first. It's just that with the ability of that woman Toki, the difficulty of truly killing them isn't small. Who knows how many years into the future she might send someone at a crucial moment. In his view, this was equivalent to personally throwing several time bombs into the future, and the kind that would be hidden, making it unknown where they were. Oh right, there's also her son, that brat Momonosuke who can order Zunshi's operation. TSK. Im felt that every single person in this family was a talent. Even Hori, who seemed ordinary, possessed a beauty that could be called the #1 beauty of Wano country. It's a bit difficult to handle, but what needs to be done must still be done. The world government, this large ship, has already begun accelerating its voyage. The small Wano country is not yet qualified to make it slow down. Pururu, pururu. At this time, the sound of the transponder snail rang out again, but this time it wasn't the one exclusively used by the five elders, but another, more ordinary transponder snail nearby. Im picked up the handset. The next moment, he saw the transponder snail speak. Lord Saint Nerona, regarding your vehicle, there have been some situations. It's Admiral Garp, he. The person speaking on the other end was Stussy. She was on Fishman Island, reporting with a helpless expression. One person pushing no above the sea surface from 10,000 meters below? Im was speechless upon hearing what Garp was going to do. Why bother? It was something Stussy could just shrink with her mini fruit ability. But this truly had Garp's style. Then let him push it. In his opinion, it was actually quite good for a dignified marine hero, a marine admiral, to put in strenuous effort to prepare a vehicle for himself. It felt a bit more interesting than simply taking it with an ability. Alright. Hanging up the call, Im had just put the handset back when the five elders' exclusive golden transponder snail rang again. There was no helping it, of course he had to answer. Lord Amu. As soon as this voice appeared, he recognized it as Saint Topman Warkery. He then asked coldly. What is it? The giant soldier guards prepared for your upcoming travel are ready. Would you like to meet them now, or wait until the day of departure? Oh? Im raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. After thinking for a moment, he instructed. Have them come over after Stussy returns. Yes, Lord. Saint Topman Warkery responded respectfully. Immediately after, he heard Im ask again. How are the battle armor and weapons being prepared for them? The industrial division is working at full capacity to rush production, but because the volume is too large, and there are 3 sets, plus new materials need to be attached, it requires some time. However, we guarantee timely completion. Im nodded coldly, accepting the explanation. Make 2 more sets, with sizes of 21.3 meters and 22.6 meters. Yes, Lord. Saint Topman Warkery never asked why. He would only silently listen and carry out the tasks. Immediately after, Im thought for a moment and felt that giant soldier sounded too ordinary, lacking any sense of grandeur. The next second, a playful look appeared in his gaze. From now on, my giant royal guard will be called giant god soldiers. Chapter 206, The Greatest Value of the Kabanrai World. The world government on the world side was busy, and the Inamoto shogunate in the Kabanrai world was also in a state of clamor at this time. A tense atmosphere permeated the air, causing a sense of unease among everyone. Because Hidden Stone's Villagto station, which served as the last gateway, had actually fallen to the Kabanrai world. Would Kongakaku, the shogunate's capital, also be besieged by the Kabanrai world in a few days? For a time, the citizens inside the city felt a sense of danger they hadn't experienced in a long time. Has the intelligence been confirmed? Is it really that guy Mima Amatori? Kiyu Amatori, the current shogun, sat in the shogun seat, looking sternly at the officials below. His gaze flickered with surprise and uncertainty. He knew his eldest son's capabilities all too well. Honestly, it was impossible not to feel scruple. Even as his father, he felt afraid. It has been confirmed. The communications department received an emergency report from Hidden Stone's Villagto station. It was indeed the Hunter Guard who guided the Kabanrai world into the inside the city, and they also sent people to block the station, shooting and killing all the citizens and soldiers attempting to escape, cutting off everyone's lifeline. That place should now be a dead zone, having become a paradise for the Kabanrai world. The person who stepped forward to reply was none other than Yatsugawa Iyam's uncle, Michiuki Makino, a high-ranking official serving as Rojo in the shogunate. What? They actually shot at humans? That's going too far. They must be severely punished. The officials and samurai of all ranks inside the court angrily accused them one after another, yet they subconsciously ignored the fact that they had also caused the deaths of over 400,000 soldiers 10 years ago. What about the weapons we purchased? Have they all been stored? Kiyu Amatori calmed down and looked at Amando Crow, chief responsible for finances. The latter respectfully replied. The 20,000 muskets and 100 large-caliber cannons purchased from overseas have been stored. In the Kabanrai world, if it's for dealing with the Kabanrai world, the first choice is definitely the steam gun, even though its manufacturing cost is much higher than that of a musket. Cannons, on the other hand, are used for defending fortresses, and usually not this many are needed. But such a large purchase of muskets and cannons shows that this shogun had long been prepared to take action against his own son. It's just that Mima Amatori acted first, giving him the feeling of I wasn't ready yet. Why did you, this turtle son, make the first move? Caught completely off guard, truly caught off guard. Then distribute them. Begin setting up the cannons. Yes. After receiving the order, the Mando Crow chief quickly left. But just then, a low-rank official ran in from outside, brushed past him, and then quickly knelt on one knee to loudly report to Kiyu Amatori. General. Communication just came from Hidden Stone's Villagto Station. Yatsugawa Ayam, the current chief steward of Aragane Station, reported that they have arrested Mima Amatori and the hunter guard who lured the Kabanrai world into the city, but Hidden Stone's Villagto Station has completely fallen. They are already on their way to Konigakaku aboard the Iron Fortress and have requested that the shogunate accommodate their citizens. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone present was immediately shocked. What had they just heard? Mima Amatori and the hunter guard had been dealt with. Is this true? That Mima Amatori was captured. Who is Yatsugawa Ayam? Why does the name sound like a woman? These high-rank samurai and high-ranking officials, although unwilling to admit it, truly did not dare to engage the hunter guard in direct combat in the wilderness. The epithet of liberators wasn't just for show, it was built with real swords and guns, piled up with the corpses of countless Kabanrai world. Among these people, the most shocked was none other than Michiuki Makino. In his impression, his niece was still a little girl, and calculating her age, she seemed to be only 19? Since that's the case, let them come. This old man also wants to see what kind of person this Yatsugawa Ayam is, to be able to. Saying this, Kiyu Amatori stopped speaking. His mood was very complicated now, extremely strange. Logically, Mima Amatori being captured was a great thing. But for some inexplicable reason, he just couldn't feel joy. Mima, you idiot. To actually fall into the hands of a woman, you're useless. The shogun muttered angrily in his heart, his face gloomy. In his opinion, this overly excellent son, even if he were to fail, should have failed at his own hands, and if he were to die, he should have been personally executed by him. Humphrey. Dismissed. Over at the Stargate base in the Ojeka region, Marshal Ryman and Sakazuki had already returned to the Sea Star mainland through the Stargate. After all, in the Kabanrai world, only the Kabanrai world could pique their interest. As for newly promoted Chief of Staff Tsuru, she chose to stay for a few more days. Splash, somewhere at the edge of the peninsula, a beautiful lady in a blue swimsuit was seen easily leaping 10 meters into midair, then diving headfirst into the seawater in a graceful arc. A moment later, she reappeared from the water, tilting her head back and shaking her dripping dark blue long hair, instantly captivating the two young girls watching from the shore. One of them had an impressive figure, short golden hair, and held a coat of justice. The other had a flat figure, long black hair, and held various items of clothing. Both had a beautiful heart glowing with a faint blue light in their chests, and their pupils shone with bright blue radiance, looking very eerie and terrifying. So beautiful, Sister Tsuru. Blue Heart gazed infatuatedly at the captivating figure swimming freely in the great sea. Ever since her evil of the heart was washed away and her consciousness and rationality were restored, she had developed a deep fascination and reliance on Tsuru. Come on, aren't you only 18? Calling me sister isn't right. You should call me sister, and call Lord Tsuru Lord. Mekko looked speechlessly at this little sister with terrifying strength. At first, she didn't dare to speak to the other party like this, but after interacting, she found that she was just a naive young girl. Come on, you're so much weaker than me, how can you be my sister? Blue Heart turned her head with a doubtful expression. Mekko was left speechless by these words. Her personality was actually quite gentle. When she used to get along with Mumai, she was like a big sister next door, but Mumai's personality was much better than Blue Heart's. So she didn't argue. Hey, what do you think Lord Tsuru's world is like? I really want to see it. Blue Heart didn't notice that her words were a bit hurtful and continued to gaze infatuatedly at Tsuru, enjoying her swim to the fullest. Also, is swimming really that much joy? But what should I do since I'm a non-swimmer? Upon hearing this, Mekko shook her head and advised. For now, don't think about going to that world of sea stars. Didn't Senior Director Addison say that we need to stay here to help attract and deal with the Kabanrai world? Actually, she wanted to see Mima Amatori even more now. She heard he went to Hidden Stone's Villagto Station to help the army take Konigakaku. Splash, in the great sea in the distance, Tsuru was completely having fun at this moment. She truly enjoyed the feeling of the cool seawater gliding over her skin. When she was young, before she ate the wash-wash fruit, her swimming skills were far stronger than Garp, Zephyr, and Sengoku. She was even jokingly called someone who could completely rival mermaids. Ah, this is great. Is this another world? It's amazing. There's even a great sea where ability users can swim freely. Looking at the seawater slipping through her hands, the 52-year-old Tsuru had a girlish smile on her face. It was a pity that no one witnessed this moment except for those two Kabanrai. They say men are young men until death, but aren't women also forever keeping a maiden's heart? In Tsuru's opinion, compared to the Kabanari world or anything else, the greatest value of this world is that it proves that not all seawater turns ability users into non-swimmers. From now on, there's finally a place where she can fully enjoy the happiness of swimming. Chapter 207, Beginning the Conquest of the World. Yes. We will definitely protect the department officials on our side. Please rest assured, the situation here is basically clear. There are no combat power levels that pose too high a danger. Vice Admiral Bullet has also led the army to occupy Sentai Station, Kurokawa Station, and Yashiro Station. Temporary military control is currently being implemented there. Okay, I will handle the reception work. Knock knock knock. At Stag Stargate Base, the door to the base commander's office was gently knocked from the outside. This caused Senior Director Addison, who had just put down the transponder snail handset, to look up. His appearance remained the same as before, wearing a neat black suit, white shirt with a blue tie, and gold-rimmed square glasses on his nose. The seriousness and composure in his gaze truly gave off an elite feeling. Come in. The next moment, as the door was pushed open, a boy and a girl entered one after another, one in green and one in red, one tall and one short. They were precisely the male protagonist and female lead of this world. Ikuma and former Mumai, now current Hazumi. Sit down and talk. Senior Director Addison smiled slightly and raised a finger to point at the two chairs opposite him. Thank you. Ikuma and Hazumi exchanged a gaze and took their seats. Just then, Senior Director Addison, sitting opposite them, asked. I heard you've made your decision? Yes. Ikuma nodded with a complex expression. The latter smiled. Then tell me. I hope your answer won't disappoint me. As soon as he finished speaking, he picked up the coffee cup on the table, first smelled it, then took a small sip, while waiting for Ikuma to organize his thoughts. I agree to join you and develop various special bullet for you, including Jet Bullet. Anyway, even if I don't agree, you will mass-produce Jet Bullet, right? Regarding this question, Senior Director Addison shrugged his shoulder noncommittally and smiled. Of course. Your Jet Bullet is truly a genius invention. Even when used on ordinary muskets, its power can rival anti-materiel rifle. How could we possibly not use it? Ikuma didn't know what anti-materiel rifle were, but he could guess some matter from the literal meaning. But I have a condition, no, a request. I hope you can let Miwa, Hazumi, recover into a normal human, and ensure she is well-fed, well-clothed, safe, and health. Although he agreed that Hazumi was a good name, he was used to calling her Mumai before, and suddenly changing how he addressed her felt a bit unfamiliar. Ikuma. Hazumi bit her lip and muttered softly to herself. That's not a problem. You're very lucky. The Biochemical Research Institute just sent a report saying they are going to conduct a white serum human experiment to record various data and situations. So, one of you can receive the injection. Senior Director Addison agreed very readily this time. Then he looked at the little girl in red and asked. But do you really want to do that? What? Hazumi and Ikuma looked over in confusion. If you recover into a normal human, your physical ability will definitely return to that of an ordinary people. Then you won't be able to combat anymore, and you'll have to stay here as a general civilian. Although he will temporarily stay here after joining the Academy of Science, he will definitely go to work in the Sea Star world in the future. So, you too. Speaking up to this point, Senior Director Addison spread his palm, looking like he didn't need to say any more. At his age and experience, he had long seen that there was something going on between these two. Although in his opinion it was clearly puppy love, Ikuma was at least an adult, but Hazumi clearly looked underage. However, the world government didn't have any clear law in this regard, so there was nothing to criticize. We'll be separated in the future? Hazumi became panicked. Looking at Ikuma, she said loudly. Then I don't agree. Whichever world you go to, I'll follow. Ikuma thought to himself. Even if you agree, I wouldn't. He then stroked her head, signaling her not to be so impatient and to calm down. Then he looked up at Senior Director Addison. Can't general citizens go to your world? Also, once I become your researcher, can I not come back? You should be able to apply to come back, but it depends on whether the Academy of Science approves your leave. Even if they agree, it also depends on whether the base on the other side of the Stargate allows it. Senior Director Addison explained to them very patiently. In short, the process is quite troublesome. It will definitely be very difficult to come back. As for civilians entering Planet C, don't even think about it for the next few years. I certainly haven't received any news about that. At this moment, Hazumi asked very seriously. Then if I don't turn back into an ordinary people, can I accompany Ikuma to Blue Star? You. Ikuma wanted to stop her, but couldn't speak. That should be fine. After all, Kabanrai still have a certain combat value. It's just that you belong to different departments, so you'll need to coordinate time with each other to meet. However, it's definitely much easier than being separated by two worlds. At least contacting each other will be very convenient. Senior Director Addison saw the little girl's gaze and knew the matter was settled. In that case, I don't want the white serum injection. Please give this opportunity to Ikema so he can turn back into an ordinary people. He is clumsy and doesn't know how to combat at all. It's better for him to do research with a normal human body. Hazumi stood up, clenched her two small fists, and made her decision resolutely. After speaking, she turned her head to look at Ikema beside her, who had an anxious expression. Compared to eating rice until I'm full every day, I'd rather be with you. Anyway, I'm already used to being a Kabanrai, used to drinking blood. But, just as Ikema was about to say something, Senior Director Addison opposite him smiled gently. You seem to have overlooked one point. There isn't just one dose of white serum. Of course, your current value and contribution are only enough to get one dose of white serum, but that might not be the case in the future. Moreover, perhaps more of this white serum can be developed in the future. That's right. Ikema suddenly understood. Looking at Hazumi with a joyful expression, he laughed loudly. Then let's go to another world together and take a look. The latter also happily showed a bright smile and nodded repeatedly. Then she teased. Then my combat weapon will be entrusted to you from now on. You're not allowed to have any dud, okay? Don't worry, I will definitely develop better and strong weapon for you. At this moment, the boy's determined gaze and the girl's shy gaze met under the watchful eye of Senior Director Addison. This made the latter subconsciously take a deep breath. Alright, you can go to the Biochemical Research Institute now. I still have matter to attend to here, so I won't see you out. With a command, he directly interrupted their intimate moment. Both showed embarrassed expressions. Ikema stood up and bowed to the other party to express his gratitude, then took the girl's small hand and left the office. Sigh. Senior Director Addison helplessly shook head. For some reason, looking at their retreating figures, he suddenly thought of his wife and daughter at home. Fortunately, it's not my daughter. Otherwise, I would definitely have to save a white serum for Director Fritz. Pu'aparu. Just then, the transponder snail at the corner of the table started calling. He picked up the handset to answer and saw it speak. Base Commander, the department officials and technical personnel from the administrative department have arrived. Okay, settle the people first. Prepare a reception banquet for the evening, I will be there. Tomorrow, send them to the various stations. Yes. Ending the call and putting back the handset, Senior Director Addison turned the chair he was sitting on and looked at the blue sky outside the large floor-to-ceiling window behind him. He smiled spiritedly. It's time to officially begin conquering this world. Chapter 208, Bullets Troop Training Style. Tat 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 tat, boom. Boom, on the city wall of Tamori Station in Mutsu Province, Hinamoto, the samurai and the crowd of soldiers watched dumbfounded as the Black Army pressing in from the other side of their vision engaged head-on with the dense cabane, using strange firearms and small bomb that looked like self-determination bag. The continuous gunshots, the explosion echoing through the sky, and the cabane's roaring, bloodthirst-filled cries filled the air. They used their blood and meat body to withstand the bullet train, launching the most tragic suicidal human wave tactics. However, those black-clad soldiers divided their battle lines into three fronts, causing the irrational cabane to also split into three waves. Their numerical advantage suddenly became less pronounced. There were no battle cry, no scream, the only sounds were the shattering of cabane body being torn apart and the dense gunshots. Look! At this moment, a samurai pointed to the battlefield on the left in shock and shouted loudly. The surrounding soldiers shifted their gaze, and their pupil instantly constricted. They could hardly believe what they were seeing. A portion of the Black Army, armed with katana, had separated and were engaging in close combat with the cabane that had approached the front lines. Although the powerful suppressive fire had kept the number of cabane from being too high, from a bird's-eye view of the scene, they still held a numerical advantage. Yet, even so, those black-clad soldiers displayed extremely astonishing swordsmanship skills, constantly swinging their long saber and fighting in a chaotic mass with the living dead whose chests glowed red. They chopped left and right, their steps agile, and with the support of their strong arm strength, they easily cut off one extending palm, arm, or even head after another. Their faces were indifferent. Even with dangerous bullet whistling past them, even with blood splashing in front of them and severed limbs piling up at their feet, they maintained a calm mindset. When the cabane on the plain were suppressed by gunfire to a number similar to their own forces, a sharp whistle signal suddenly sounded from somewhere. Hearing this sound, all the black-clad soldiers immediately stopped shooting, slung their firearms behind their backs, and then swiftly drew the katana from their waists. Without a word, they charged forward and joined the bloody slaughter. HRRGH. A soldier had just swept off the head of 3 Cabane in front of him when a jumping Cabane pounced from behind. Its burst speed was very fast, and he could only choose to turn sideways as much as possible while using his left arm to block the opponent. Crack. The next second, the Cabane's open mouth bit down hard on the soldier's arm, but the texture felt wrong to it, and even its teeth were shaken and cracked. PFFT, however, the soldier didn't give it time to react. He cut off its head with a single blade, then kicked the headless body flying with a fierce stomp, and continued to turn and kill other Cabane. During this movement, the soldier's sleeve swayed in the wind, faintly revealing arm guards with a metallic sheen tied underneath. They're all samurai. A middle-aged samurai on a city wall, dressed in samurai attire with a katana at his waist, muttered in disbelief. In their impression, only samurai had the ability to cut off a Cabane's head with a long saber, but that was at most in a one-on-one situation. 1 against 2 was entirely up to fate. Black uniform, fighting Cabane in the wild. Could they be the hunter guard led by Mima Amatori? Manager Shiroi Emma, who had personally came to watch the battle after receiving the news, looked at the Black Army, which was gradually merging its 3 battle lines and slowly approaching the city wall, with surprise and uncertainty, surrounded by a crowd of high official. If that's the case, it's truly astonishing. Not only are they all elite samurai, but their numbers are in the thousands. How did they achieve this? About an hour later, outside the city was a sea of corpse and blood, but the roars of the Cabane were no longer heard, nor were any gunshots or explosion. Tens of thousands of Cabane had been slaughtered by these few thousand people. However, some scattered black-clad corpses could still be seen in the court. Even with the protection of armed guards and leg guards, facing the encirclement of the Cabane still resulted in more or less casualties for this army. But even so, it was enough to be deeply shocking. The city wall of Tamare Station was completely silent, a scene of deathly stillness. At this moment, a samurai showed a hesitant expression and softly asked, "Should we open the gate for them?" Manager Shiroi Emma remained silent, giving no answer. To be honest, he didn't really want his group of hunter guard to enter his territory. But where is their station city? Another samurai asked doubtfully, looking into the distance. Still, no one responded. After all, that wasn't important, because none of the high official and samurai present were willing to open the city gate for them. After all, they hadn't invited the hunter guard here. Soon, the Black Army reached the moat. If the castle gate drawbridge wasn't lowered next, they simply couldn't enter the fortress. This was the thought of everyone on the city wall. Beep, another long, sharp whistle signal sounded in the distance, causing many people to shiver involuntarily. What are they doing? Manager Shiroi Emma quickly stepped forward, leaned on the battlement with both hands, and looked down. Then, he was shocked to see the black-clad soldier actually starting to jump into the water one after another and quickly swim towards them. Swimming so fast. No, what are they trying to do? What's the point of swimming to the base of the wall? Can they even climb up? It should be known that the height of this city wall was dozens of meters high to defend against the large number of Cabane in the wild. And if Mima Amatori wanted to enter the fortress, he should have sent someone to make contact. Although he had already decided to refuse the other party, at most he would send the hunter guard a batch of supplies or something. Because no one had given an order, all the soldiers on the city wall just stared blankly as the Black Army swam across the great river. In the distance. Good, once we take this fortress, we can rotate another batch of people over. Douglas Barrett, the current Army Headquarters Lieutenant General, sat on a specially made large heavy motorcycle, watching this scene and splitting his mouth into an extremely terrifying smile. His unusually sturdy body was draped in a very wide black justice coat, making him look extremely mighty and extraordinary. This Kabanari world is truly a perfect training ground. This was a heartfelt compliment Bullet gave to this world. In these past few days, he had already rotated 2 batches of 5,000 army. The soldiers who had first come with him had long since returned to Landiforce to rest and recuperate. Each time, he would first let these recruits engage with large numbers of Cabane in the wild. Once they adapted to the blood and death on the battlefield, he would take them to find a station. Not for rest, but for siege. Humphrey, only by conquering large military fortress amidst bullet rain and cannon fire can one be considered an elite soldiers, ha 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 ha. Along with Bullet's unrestrained wild laughter, the army soldier who had swum across the moat in front began to put their long saber back into their scabbard and take out steel grappling hook one by one. Under the gaze of the people above, which turned from surprise and doubt to fear, they first quickly spun the grappling hook a few times, then threw them upwards with force. In the blink of an eye, they hooked onto the edge of the city wall, and then began climbing up the smooth wall surface, gripping the steel ropes with both hands. They're attacking the fortress. Shoot. Quick, shoot. A samurai chief steward standing beside manager Shiroyama was the first to react, shouting order to the surroundings with a mix of anger and alarm. Tat 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 tat. Suddenly, gunshots erupted loudly, but the bullet rain came from below. It was the army who hadn't yet taken their turn to climb the ropes, starting to provide fire support for their comrades. PFFT. The next second, manager Shiroyama, who had just started to react, was struck through the forehead by a bullet, splattering scarlet blood. Chapter 209, Crocodile's Expectation. Woo 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 woo, a high-pitched whistle sound rang out before the tightly shut city gate of Kongakaku. It was a massive white iron armored train, standing a full 10 meters tall from its wheels to its roof. It's worth noting that as the capital of the shogunate, Kongakaku's city gate was not of the drawbridge style like other stations, but rather a steel gate that lifted up and down. The turret roofs on its city gate were surprisingly all covered with blue-green tiles, presenting a lush green vista that truly revealed an ancient luxury. Report: the Iron Fortress has arrived from Line 4. Inside the city, within a blue-tiled hall that was the most prominent in height, a samurai knelt on one knee, lowering his head and loudly reporting to General Sama on the platform. Finally arrived? Let them in. Kiyu Amatori pondered for a moment before issuing the order. At this time, the samurai chief steward and the Roja stood on either side of him, as one was the military minister and the other the political minister. General, I always feel something feels strange. The samurai chief steward said in a low voice. Michiyuki Makino also began to suggest. How about this, I'll go meet them and see if it's really my little niece. All right. Kiyu Amatori nodded. After the Roja stepped out of the main hall, he instructed the samurai chief steward. Dispatch 2 teams of samurai and 4 teams of soldiers. Yes. Clank clank clink, as the city gate slowly lifted upwards, the iron fortress proceeded inside the city along the track. By the time it slowly came to a stop at the station, it was already targeted by steam gun muzzles from all directions. I am the chief steward of the Yatsum clan, I am. In this tense atmosphere, a girl of excellent appearance, wearing a pink long dress, walked out from the front cabin of the train and shouted loudly towards the surrounding soldiers. We are escorting Mima Amatori here. Beside her was Mima Amatori, whose arms and wrists were bound by thick rope. He was wearing a thin white shirt, his head slightly lowered. He looked very disheveled and dejected. However, the guards beside the two, besides the samurai Kurasu, also included Shiryo, a former cadre of the Hunter Guard. He was also dressed as an ordinary soldier at this time. Princess Ayam, it really is you. You've grown up. Where is your father? As soon as the group got off the train, Michiyuki Makino, who had been waiting, walked over with a few samurai and asked in surprise. Lord Uncle, long time to see. Yatsugawa Ayam looked at him with a hint of surprise. Hearing the question, she showed a sad expression and softly replied. By the Kabane. Is that so? What a pity. But you said you captured Mima Amatori? How did you manage that? Michiyuki Makino looked at Mima Amatori with great surprise. It was achieved fortunately through the collective efforts of everyone on the Iron Fortress and after paying a certain sacrifice. At that time, most of the hunters' soldiers were luring Kabane or intercepting fleeing citizens. We went around the back and directly occupied Kotetsujo, which had sparse military strength, and captured Mima Amatori within. Yatsugawa Ayam spoke calmly, explaining everything. I see, that truly was fortunate. Michiyuki Makino suddenly understood. There was nothing they could do, they didn't know that Mima Amatori was a Kabanari. Uncle, everyone has lost their hometown and is physically and mentally exhausted from traveling such a long distance. We hope Kongakaku can take us in. Yatsugawa Ayam said sincerely. That's not a problem, but everyone here, regardless of whether they have scars or not, must first be held in a prison cell for 3 days. Can you accept that? Michiyuki Makino asked. Understood, we are willing to accept. Then you and Mima Amatori will come with me to see General Sama. The others will go for inspection. Michiyuki Makino glanced at the low-headed Mima Amatori and turned to leave. 30 minutes later, in the Shogunate Council Hall. It's been a long time, Mima. Kiyu Amatori sat on the main seat atop a raised platform with 2 tiers of steps, looking down at Mima Amatori kneeling below. The two were father and son, yet they were like enemies. Yes, father. Meanwhile, the samurai and soldiers who were leading the citizens from the Iron Fortress towards the inspection hall discovered something strange along the way. What's the situation? Why are all these people so tall? I checked, and basically, they're all around 1.8 meters. Maybe that's why they could capture Mima Amatori. How could they do it without some skill? The problem is there don't seem to be any women or children, or elderly. The high-rank samurai leading the way at the very front twitched his ears, clearly having heard the discussion among the surrounding soldiers. This made him hesitate and stop, then turn around to examine these survivors and soldiers who were said to be from Arrogane Station and Hidden Stone's Villigto Station. He suddenly realized that they were indeed all at the same height as himself, and the muscles beneath their thin clothes appeared very bulging. These gazes. When he saw that every one of these people dared to look him in the eye as equals, a bad feeling arose in his heart. Suddenly, he saw the person closest to him slowly reveal a playful, sinister grin towards him. Not good. Bang, suddenly. Just as the high-rank samurai made a move to draw his blade, his face was instantly covered and grabbed by a palm, causing his vision to suddenly turn to darkness. The next second, with a muffled squelch, the person with the sinister grin was seen drawing his blade and cutting off the high-rank samurai's large head. A foul-smelling hot blood spurted from the severed neck, turning into drops of blood rain in the air and dripping onto the nearby samurai and soldiers. Murder. Amidst the rising and falling screams and exclamations, the army headquarters colonel raised his neck and shouted loudly. Act. This ear-splitting roar immediately suppressed all the noise, but it also directly ignited the raging war. The army soldiers, having received the order, quickly pulled out pistols from under their clothing and fired repeatedly at the panicked Kongakaku soldiers around them. Bang 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 bang. How could the Kongakaku soldiers have ever seen such small firearms? They had originally thought that disarming these people of their steam guns would solve everything. In that instant, over 10 soldiers were shot through the chest, neck, shoulder, and even face, only managing to let out one last scream before falling to the ground dead. But at this moment, all the Kongakaku soldiers reacted. They occupied all the advantageous terrain and were clearly superior in numbers. Therefore, they quickly calmed down and began to return fire with the steam guns they used to fight the Kabane. Although they dared not engage the Kabane face to face, they were not afraid of opponents who were also human. Or rather, as soldiers of the shogunate capital, they inherently had a sense of superiority over soldiers from outside. Swish 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 swish. However, all these advantages and mindsets were instantly turned into nothingness amidst the explosion flames and air currents when the army soldiers threw out grenades one after another. They had never seen grenades either. Not to mention the army officers who were moving at high speed in the court, constantly slaughtering the soldiers who were standing in high places and shooting downwards. Wherever they went was a complete massacre. Whether soldiers or samurai, they truly achieved equality for all beings. There was simply no opponent that required a second swing of the blade. Take the city gate. Meanwhile, outside Kongakaku City, a black iron armored train rushed towards the open steel city gate along the track with a clanking sound, like a giant wild beast. Pa. 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 The 2.5-meter tall crocodile, holding a lit cigar, stood on top of the Kotetsugyo, facing the oncoming gale, listening to the dense gunshots from inside the city, and laughing wildly and arrogantly. Especially his black justice coat, which fluttered non-stop in the wind. At this moment, he truly began to like the feeling of leading an army to occupy a nation's capital city, even though the opponent was truly a bit unbearable to look at. But he believed that in the future, he would definitely encounter opponents and wars that would make him feel exhilarated. Whitebeard, I will catch up to you sooner or later, surpass you, and defeat you, with this power of the multiverse. Chapter 210, 4th Update. Army of Salvation. 10 minutes ago, inside the Konigakaku meeting hall, the atmosphere became extremely serious as the soldiers aimed their steam guns at Mima Amatori. This made Yatsugawa Ayome quite astonished. She just felt that since Mima Amatori's arms were bound and he was completely kneeling on the ground, was it still necessary to be so careful? Stop acting. From his elevated position, Kyu Amatori looked down with a stern face upon his overly excellent eldest son, with whom he had already severed their father-son relationship. I know you're definitely plotting something. He just glanced at Yatsugawa Ayome, simply not believing that this kind of little girl could capture Mima Amatori. He thought inwardly. Son, oh son, your biggest miscalculation was choosing her. Bring it up. Kyu Amatori gave an order to the two samurai not far away. They quickly responded, then took out a short sword with a red scabbard and white sword hilt from a rosewood box and respectfully presented it. Among your possessions, I found something that brings back memories. This shogun took the short sword and held it in his right hand, then walked in front of Mima Amatori, who was below the steps. Mima Amatori slightly raised his head and glanced, then said in a low voice with a complex expression. This is the only gift you ever gave me. I wanted to return it to you at the end. Father, my lord, if you have pity on me, please at least kill me yourself in the end. After speaking, Mima Amatori, looking submissive and ready to be slaughtered, closed his eyes. Very well. Kyu Amatori agreed with a blank expression. He held the scabbard in his left hand and the sword hilt in his right hand, but just as he drew out half of the blade, he felt a pain in his palm. When he opened his right hand and brought it before his eyes to look, he was surprised to find a spot of blood had appeared on his palm, and more blood drops were continuously seeping out from within. "Father, my lord." At this moment, Mima Amatori raised his head, looked up at his father, and said with a smile, "Before I die, I have a matter to tell you. Why I was able to survive in combat with the Cabane. The threat of the Cabane lies in their ability to lurk among the populace. Even at this very moment, their numbers are still continuously increasing, and I know how to distinguish them, which is why I've been able to live until now." Just as he used his words to attract everyone's attention, yet no one noticed that their General Sama's right hand was starting to turn black and purple from the palm, and the blood vessels were rapidly emitting a flame-like radiance. "You're talking about the Cabane's bite mark, right? That's why we need to conduct inspections." The samurai chief steward shouted loudly, but Mima Amatori shook his head and said with a smile, "Relying solely on inspections cannot discover all the Cabane. The evidence is that there are Cabane right here now." "What?" As soon as the words fell, the samurai and soldiers in the main hall looked at each other in panic. The fear that the Cabane brought them was truly too long-lasting and had long been deeply rooted in their hearts. "All of you, look clearly." Mima Amatori slowly stood up, with his hands bound behind his back, but his current appearance was full of vigor and high spirits, and he shouted spiritedly. "After discovering one, you must strike first before being killed. Otherwise, the next person to turn into a Cabane will be you." Every single word he spoke was so clear and distinct, yet they pierced into everyone's hearts like fine needles, making people feel fear uncontrollably. Even that Yatsugawa Ilm subconsciously became nervous. Humphrey. At this moment, the gun-wielding soldier standing guard nearby suddenly discovered that on General Amatori's right hand, the charred black color was spreading towards his arm at a speed visible to the naked eye. Especially those glowing blood vessel patterns made his pupil suddenly contract even more, and instantly, immense fear erupted in his heart. This made him quickly raise his steam gun and aim it. "Ah! You dare to point a gun at me?" Kyu Amatori glared furiously at this young soldier, but as soon as he opened his mouth, he attracted the gaze of more samurai and soldiers. Now everyone saw that this general's neck had developed Cabane symptoms. "Look! It's the radiance emitted by the Cabane." Mima Amatori straightened up and shouted loudly with excitement. The next second, that young soldier, spurred on by his voice, pulled the trigger forcefully, instantly shooting through Kyu Amatori's chest, causing him to fall to the ground with a scream. "Continue firing. Don't ever think that one shot can penetrate a Cabane's heart." Mima Amatori, this dutiful son, continued to fan the flames and instigate from the side, instantly causing more gunshots to continuously hit his old father's body, bringing with them streaks of steaming blood. Meanwhile, he exerted force with both hands, easily tearing apart the thick rope around his wrists. This was too simple for a Kabanari. He then drew out that gift his father had given him in his childhood. But he found that a layer of Kabanari heart membrane had already been attached to the blade, which was currently emitting streaks of red blood vessel radiance. Mima Amatori watched with a blank expression as his father let out an angry roar towards him. "Remember, it wasn't me who killed you, but fear, father, my lord." As soon as the words fell, the black and red blade stabbed into the latter's heart, which had begun to glow, and then he just watched him fall down the steps, spurting blood. "General. General Sama." The officials watched dumbfounded at the Cabane corpse that had fallen before them. Bang 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 bang, bang 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 bang. Just at this moment, dense gunshots sounded again, but this time they weren't from these soldiers inside the hall, but from outside the main hall. Report. The soldiers of the Iron Fortress are launching a rebellion. Akudo Bushi-sama has fallen in battle. Only saw a low-ranking samurai quickly run in and shout loudly, but immediately he was stunned by the situation inside the hall. Mima. As expected. That samurai chief steward named Kotonakoshi drew his katana. Just as he was about to say something, pointing the tip of his blade at Mima Amatori on the steps, he was loudly interrupted by the latter. "It's not over yet. Since even the general is a Cabane, there must definitely be other Cabane mixed inside the city, right among us." This time, Mima Amatori actually picked up the loudspeaker used to announce to the entire fortress. This made his voice, accompanied by the chaotic gunshots from the direction of the city gate, resound throughout the entire Kongakaku. The citizens and soldiers throughout the entire fortress were stunned. There are already Cabane among us? To be honest. If it were normal times, these people would only listen as if it were a joke. Where is this place? This is the shogunate's capital. How could that be? But the problem is, these gunshots and explosions coming from afar clearly indicate encountering a large number of Cabane attacking the fortress. This made everyone panic. "Quickly give this to me." Suddenly, a man fixed his gaze on a soldier standing guard nearby, or rather, on the steam gun in his hand. Driven by fear, he completely lost his reason and actually rushed forward to start snatching that gun. Bang! Following a muffled gunshot that shot through an innocent person opposite, a great chaos began to spread, manipulated by great fear. Soon, the gunshots were not only coming from the city gate, but more, they were sounding from every corner of Kongakaku. They were slaughtering each other, accusing each other of being the bane. Everyone had lost their composure, only fighting for that sliver of hope for themselves. Some people were fleeing, some were protecting their family, while others chose to riot. They wanted weapons. Ha-ha-ha! In the high altitude, Crocodile, who had turned into a mass of sandstorm, looked down upon this delightful great commotion and let out the most unrestrained laughter. That's right, this is what I wanted to see. This brat Mima Amatori, his understanding of the human heart and his grasp of fear are truly remarkable. It's just a pity I can't destroy this place. He felt that if he could have a bomb of super great power and throw it down when everyone was exhausted from the slaughter, that would truly be a perfect conclusion. Next is the performance of our army becoming the savior. Crocodile's gaze looked towards that pitch-black train that had already rushed into the city gate. Inside that train car were fully armed army soldiers. Chapter 211, 5th Update. Bearing the justice of the world government. Added for the protector of those years of preference, Planet C Homeworld, impel down's infinite hell. Click, as the large elevator heavily descended, the sound of machinery turning began to echo around. Following this, the massive steel gate rapidly lifted upwards. Soon, Magellan, standing nearly 5 meters tall and dressed in a black uniform, appeared there. Beside him stood 3 men in black with indifferent expressions, dressed in suit. Let's go. Magellan reminded them, taking the lead to walk into this place that, to the outside world, simply didn't exist. Every prisoner held here was a super criminal or great pirate with a bounty of several 100 million Bailey, or even over 1 billion Bailey. Without his personal guidance as vice warden, not even official of the world government could enter. It's you again. Suddenly, an angry roar echoed from a prison cell not far away, followed by a wave of dark golden mental fluctuation sweeping over it like a tide. Seeing this scene, Magellan took a step forward, using his body size to block most of the mental impact for the 3 people behind him. Although he knew these people didn't need help, since they were guests, as the vice warden, he should still fulfill his duty. Behave yourself, Shiki. Otherwise, I'll cut off your food for 3 days. Magellan reprimanded him with a displeased, deep voice. Although Golden Lion Shiki was a top-tier big shot capable of turning the world upside down on the outside, here he was just a prisoner, and he, Magellan, was a prison guard. As expected, upon hearing such a threat, the Dark Golden Conqueror's hockey stopped surging out. Magellan, every time you bring people in, you always let one person out. Last time it was Crocodile, the time before that was Bullet, this time it should be my turn. Shiki, with a head of thick golden long hair like a majestic lion, sat on the cold stone platform and shouted loudly. However, his voice clearly revealed weakness, fatigue, and anxiety. He had originally thought he could endure the loneliness with his willpower. But who would have thought that truly experiencing the hopeless prison life, staying in this dark, narrow prison cell every day, eating food that could only be described as pig slop, and then feeling his body weaken little by little under the erosion of time, he deeply felt a certain invisible pain. The worst part was that he personally watched Bullet and Crocodile being taken out one after another. This caused a huge negative impact on his mindset. Didn't they say that no matter who came here, they couldn't get out? Then treat everyone equally. Bastard world government. Hey, when it's your turn, we'll naturally come for you. Now be quiet. Magellan retorted unceremoniously towards Shiki, then continued deeper into infinite hell with the 3 men in black. But with Shiki's observation hockey, he could still sense where they went. It's that brat Kaido. How long has he even been in here? Shiki's mindset collapsed again. This former admiral of the flying pirate fleet couldn't understand what it was that brats like Bullet, Crocodile, and Kaido, who hadn't even fully matured, could do, but he, the mighty Golden Lion, couldn't. As long as I get one chance to go out, I'll definitely find a way to escape. At this moment, Magellan and the 4 others had arrived outside Kaido's prison cell. One of the men in black signaled to another with his gaze. The latter nodded and lightly waved his right hand above his head, causing a faint purple light barrier to appear, completely enveloping the entire prison cell. Humphrey suddenly, a disdainful scoff came from inside. What, you want to take me for that damn experiment again? Didn't you draw my blood before? Did you run out? The owner of this voice was naturally Beast's Kaido. He was currently lying on his side on the stone platform, with his back to the cell door, looking like he didn't want to be bothered. He had actually thought about relying on his excellent physical talent, using brute force and will to endure the weakness brought by the sea-stone handcuffs and leg cuffs and smash through the cell door to escape. But every time he was about to make a move, the collar around his neck would emit a green light and control his body. Furthermore, his shadow under his feet had been cut off by that gecko Maria, who kindly told him that if sunlight shone on him now, he would turn to ash and vanish. Now there was absolutely no way out. Kaido suddenly felt he understood why this impel down was called the world's #1 prison. The methods of confinement were too formidable. Strangely, despite his loud voice, the sound he made was completely inaudible to the prisoner in the other prison cells. One must know that every prisoner here had sharp ears and eyes. But for the 4 people standing at the edge of Kaido's prison cell, it had no effect. Go in. Magellan opened a cell door with a key, then didn't go in himself, stepping directly outside the purple light barrier, indicating that he had no interest in knowing their conversation. At the same time, one of the men in black walked in, while the other 2 stood guard on either side of the cell door, one of whom had a faint purple halo continuously blooming from his palm. Inside the prison cell, even with someone walking in, Kaido didn't turn around to face them. Do you want to go out? Just this light sentence from the newcomer instantly changed his expression. He had heard from the inmates in the surrounding cells that Douglas Barrett and Crocodile had been taken out before. Cough cough, tell me. Kaido slowly sat up, looking at the man in black standing before him with a blank expression, and asked. What do you want me to do? Fight for the world government across the multiverse? Huh? Kaido didn't hear clearly for a moment, and scoffed. As expected, you want me to be your dog. Do you think that's possible? I'm a dragon. I'll say it again. For the world government, fight, across the multiverse. Kaido heard clearly this time and also noticed the emphasis on the words multiverse, but he didn't understand what it meant. What is the multiverse? Does it refer to Linland's Todo Land Kingdom? He remembered that this nation had recently acquired the name of Todo Land, which seemed to have been proposed by Linland herself. But before he could figure it out, he saw the man in black take out a visual den mushi from his pocket and place it in his palm to play. Soon, a clear projection screen appeared in the prison cell. Through certain means, the world government has mastered a stargate that can lead to other worlds. Now, Douglas Barrett and Sir Crocodile have both accepted the identity of Army Lieutenant General and are leading the Army Headquarters Army to fight in this other world code named Cabane. As he spoke slowly, the screen feed began to play various high-definition images. There were scenes of Douglas Barrett, wearing a black justice coat, sitting on a large motorcycle, commanding a group of army soldier also riding heavy motorcycle in an encirclement and suppression of a large group of Cabane. There were also scenes of Sir Crocodile, wearing a black justice coat, leading army soldier to eliminate the Cabane at Hidden Stone's Village Tow Station. And even more so, the scene from a few days ago where Blue Heart manifested as a pitch-black giant and fiercely fought against Sakazuki, who was also wearing a black justice coat. Especially the last one. The scene of dense, large and small gun barrel and cannon barrels spraying out purple beam colliding head-on with a giant magma fist in the air truly made Kaido's eyes widen to the extreme, his pupil inside trembling violently. The most interesting thing is that the Great Sea in this other world will turn ability user into non-swimmer. You can swim freely in the water. You can personally experience it then. After speaking, the man in black smiled slightly at the completely stunned Kaido and asked. How about it? Don't you like war, like combat? Then instead of fighting amongst ourselves in our world, would you like to engage in infinite, massive war against civilization, nation, and expert from other worlds? Of course. The premise for all of this is that you must bear the name of justice of the world government. Chapter 212, You must bear the world government's name of justice. Ha 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 ha. When Kaido heard this, he threw his head back and laughed, or rather, roared with laughter, tears welling up in the corners of his eyes from laughing so hard, he simply couldn't stop. The man in black in front of him didn't stop or scold him. He just watched him laugh non-stop with a blank expression, showing excellent patience. It was quite exaggerated. Kaido laughed for a full 3 minutes before taking a deep breath and sneering. My apologies, but what you just said was simply too funny. It's alright. You'll be wearing the coat of justice sooner or later. I hope you can laugh just as heartily when you look in the mirror then. The man in black smiled faintly, not minding at all. However, his words made Kaido pause. Thinking about it carefully, it really was the damn truth. Humphrey, I haven't agreed yet. Is that so? Then you refuse. I shall return and report. With that, the man in black directly turned off the visual den mushi and was about to turn and leave without hesitation. Wait. Kaido was startled and quickly spoke to stop him, but found that the man in black completely ignored him. His figure instantly surged, appearing before the cell door and blocking the other party with his body. Is something wrong? The man in black put on a puzzled expression. What's your problem? Is there something wrong with your head? I said I haven't agreed yet, not that I won't agree. Aren't we supposed to be discussing this? Kaido glared down at the smaller man with surging anger. He was truly feeling a bit of lingering fear now. If he hadn't stopped this guy just now, would he have really left the prison cell and then? Then what is your meaning? Kaido stood firmly blocking the cell door and said in a deep voice. Humphrey, first tell me what you want this old man to do. Alright then, the plan is as follows. You need to first help the world government take down Wano country, mainly dealing with Kazuki Oden. The man in black rubbed his chin and thought for a moment, deciding to reveal a little information. You also need to disband your beast pirates and let them be incorporated into our various departments. For example, Mr. Queen's talent in biochemical and human body renovation is enough for him to enter the Biochemical Research Institute under the Academy of Science. After you've done all this, you will be granted the military rank and identity of Army Lieutenant General. Then, by following orders, you can go to the other world to wage war. After hearing such a long speech, Kaido's face completely darkened. He instinctively wanted to refuse out of anger, but then he heard the other party say again. Think about it, when you're waging war across the multiverse in the future, what use is the beast pirates? Compared to the few people under you, don't you think leading an army of hundreds of thousands, or even millions, into a full-scale war with another world civilization would be much more exhilarating? Click. This sentence precisely struck a chord with Kaido. His entire body froze there, but in his mind, he was imagining the grand and magnificent scene the other party described. That's right, wasn't this the massive war he had always dreamed of? Compared to a civilization war of this scale, keeping the beast pirates did seem a bit petty and meaningless. Then what are you planning to do with King and my daughter? Kaido swallowed hard and asked again. Because Yamato was only 4 years old at this time and hadn't yet come into contact with Kazuki Oden's accursed logbook, her mind hadn't been poisoned or polluted. So, the relationship between father and daughter was still very normal. Yamato didn't call herself Kazuki Oden, nor did Kaido call Yamato his son. Their feelings for each other were also harmonious. And King was Kaido's first companion. Both of them had escaped from the Academy of Science on Punk Hazard back then. Of course, at that time, the Academy of Science was still called the Navy Science Unit Headquarters. Furthermore, Kaido was very aware of how sensitive King's race issue was, which is why he specifically asked about him. Among the entire beast pirates, only these two were worth caring about. Your daughter Yamato should be taken to Marine Headquarters Manafort and receive the best education and life there, and she will have many excellent peers for company. As for the Lunarian tribe descendant whose real name is Arbel, he will most likely need to undergo examination at the Biochemical Research Institute first, and then await further instructions from the higher-ups. Upon hearing this, Kaido sneered. Examination? You're planning to dissect him directly, aren't you? Haven't you world government been hunting down his race all along? Speaking of that, I have a document here you can look at. You can also show it to Mr. Arbel later. Seeing that Kaido's mockery didn't anger him, the man in black ordered the man in black outside the door. Bring the box in. Soon, another man in black came with a black box and tried to push the door open but found it wouldn't budge. This made him suspect that the cell door was locked again. Mr. Kaido? The man in black inside the prison cell raised his hand and smiled. Kaido silently moved aside, no longer blocking the cell door. Please. Soon, the man in black took out a thin document from the black box handed over by his subordinate. After the latter silently left, he handed it to Kaido. This is a pardon? Yes, this is a pardon for the Lunarian tribe personally signed by the 5 elders. From now on, the world government will no longer capture or slaughter them, and they are allowed and encouraged to find partners and procreate more offspring. After repeatedly reading the content of the document several times, Kaido suddenly felt that he had received too many shocks and stimuli today. These matters were simply too unbelievable. Why is this? The man in black smiled slightly. Of course, it's because of the value the Lunarian tribe possesses. An extraordinary innate physique, the ability to generate flame themselves, and a pair of wings capable of high-speed flight, a race said to be able to survive under various environmental conditions in nature. Don't you think this is an indispensable combat trace for the world government's conquest of the multiverse in the future? Kaido strongly agreed in his heart. If there were truly tens of thousands of King, then the sky could be left to them in future world wars. Thinking of this, he finally felt relieved. He no longer had to worry about his little brother being killed by the world government. As for his daughter Yamato being sent to the Marines to be raised, that was also a good thing. After all, her mother had just. I have a requirement. Tell me. Kaido looked at the other party with an extremely serious gaze and said in a deep voice. After I take down Wano country for you, You cannot forbid me from returning there. Onigashima must still be my territory, and I want to live there normally. This. The man in black hesitated, then gave a bitter smile. I'm sorry, this is not something I can decide. Although because of Wano country's important value, troops will definitely need to be stationed there, but whether you can stay there is unknown. I need to request instructions from the higher-ups. Then call and ask. This matter is very important to this old man. At the very least, I must be allowed to return to Wano country with Yamato on the day of the fire festival every year. Take this seriously. Kaido said fiercely, glaring at him. Alright, please wait a moment. The man in black thought for a moment and still took out a transponder snail, preparing to ask the higher-ups for their opinion. Hello? Lord, Kaido has agreed, but he has made a requirement. Chapter 213, Me, playing along with Yukabanarai World. At the Line 4 city gate of Kongakaku, the black train, originally belonging to the Hunter Guard and called Kitetsugyo, seemed to have no intention of entering the station. Its large and long body directly blocked the city gate. Swish. 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 The next moment, the armored train cars on both sides of the black train lifted like wings, immediately revealing the army soldiers inside, dressed in black uniforms and armed with heavy assault rifles. Directly shoot and kill anyone holding steam guns or attacking you with blades. Our mission is to disarm all military strength here and suppress all riots and rebellions. An army colonel wearing a black justice coat pointed his long saber towards the inside the city and ordered loudly. His voice was very resonant, completely unaffected by the noisy gunshots. Yes, sir. 1,000 army soldiers jumped down from the 3 to 4 meter high train cars, splitting into 2 large teams that quickly spread out to the left and right. They then formed countless squads of 3 to 5 people, spreading out into a wide and long firing line, sweeping from west to east. Fire. The first line of army squads immediately encountered the Kongakaku soldiers who had come for support. After all, this was the shogunate capital, and the military strength was very sufficient. But the former were well prepared, while the latter were caught by surprise. This led to the army firing first, unleashing fierce rapid fire upon them. Da-da-da-da-da, the unique gunshots of the heavy assault rifles, distinct from steam guns, began to echo throughout the entire Kongakaku amidst the bright gunfire flash. Thump, thump, the 9mm bullet is a large caliber bullet. Although it has a short range, it creates a fist-sized blood hole the moment it hits the human body. This is a firearm specifically designed to deal with the Kabanrai heart. Therefore, no matter where these bullets hit, they would cause the target to lose combat capability. This directly led to the situation completely tipping towards the army the moment the two sides clashed. In almost a single exchange, over a dozen shogunate soldiers fell. They are the Hunter Guard. Counterattack. A samurai hiding behind a building shouted, holding his katana. Shoot. Bang 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 bang, the characteristic muffled gunshots of the steam guns rose and fell, linking together in a string. These guns were also used to deal with kabane, and they also had a short range. However, their characteristic lay in penetration power. They could easily pierce through the human body upon impact, but the muzzle was not very large, meaning the bullet wouldn't remain inside the target. In terms of lethality, they were slightly inferior to heavy assault rifles. This was mainly because the jet bullet developed by Ikema had not yet become widespread. If it were jet bullets, hitting a person would be terrifying. But the key difference between the two sides was not in these things, but in the rate of fire. Although steam guns could also fire rapid fire, how could they compare to assault rifles that fired 480 rounds per minute, or 8 bullets per second? The air gap between the two sides was too large. This meant that even though the army squads only had 3 to 5 people, they could still suppress dozens of shogunate soldiers across a street with their firepower. Batch after batch of shogunate soldiers fell under the incoming bullet rain. The samurai holding long sabers were even worse off. Not only could they not fight back, but even hiding behind buildings, they would be killed by the sweeping bullets. They were just a pile of wooden buildings, completely ineffective as cover. Shogunate Assembly Hall. At this moment, there was also chaos here. Everyone was controlled by Mima Amatori's words. Invisible fear controlled the soldiers will like demonic claws. There are kabane there too. Bang, bastard, are you a kabane too? Bang, it's a kabane, you're a kabane, right? Die. Complete chaos, utter chaos. This was the legendary camp riot. The long-suppressed fear and tension towards kabane in everyone's heart completely erupted, causing them to frantically curse and attack anyone around them. Stop it. Everyone put down your guns. Don't fight anymore. Stop fighting. Yatsugawa Ilm looked at them anxiously, shouting herself hoarse, but at this moment, her voice couldn't reach anyone's ears. Or rather, even if someone heard, they wouldn't stop their actions. Princess Ayam, it's too dangerous here. Michiuki Makino saw this scene and quickly pulled his niece to a corner to hide. If you're not careful, they'll bite you from behind. Mima Amatori, however, was enjoying himself on the stage, continuing to provoke the nerves and psychology of the crowd. Enough, Mima. Kotonakoshi rushed up the steps in a fit of rage and slashed down with his blade. In the eyes of this samurai chief steward, the person before him was no longer the son of the shogun, but a demon wearing human skin. Pucci, a flash of red light passed. Mima Amatori casually slit his throat, watching expressionlessly as the other party clutched his constantly bleeding neck, rolling down the steps in pain and despair, landing right next to Kyu Amatori's corpse. Loyalty is commendable, samurai spirit is commendable, but weak is weak. Swish, just then, another whistling sound came from behind. This caused Mima Amatori to quickly leave his spot, dodging the sharp long saber swung at him, and then turned to look at the newcomer. Mima, you've gone too far. This farce should end. It was Yatsugawa Ayam, holding a katana and confronting him. The resolute gaze on her small face made Mima Amatori smile slightly. How brave. Then let's give it a try. As soon as he finished speaking, Mima Amatori's figure darted forward, appearing before Ayam in the blink of an eye. The black blade in his hand, emitting streaks of red light, slashed down fiercely, seemingly showing no mercy just because she was a beautiful woman. Clang, but an astonishing scene occurred. The frail Ayam actually blocked this attack with a long saber in her hand, although her trembling arm looked somewhat strained. But thinking that her opponent was Mima Amatori, who could instantly kill even Chief Steward Nikoshi, the soldiers and samurai nearby who noticed the situation on the stage found it unbelievable. Clang. Clang clang clang. Next, this beautiful woman Chief Steward displayed extremely exquisite swordsmanship. The dazzling blade light was like a dancing butterfly, engaging in a fierce clash with Mima Amatori on the stage. Especially Ayam's serious, resolute, and brave expression attracted more and more attention. Gradually, the melee below the stage began to quiet down. Instead, the continuous sound of clashing blades became the mainstream in the main hall. How is that possible? Even Michiuki Makino, her uncle, was stunned below the stage. Just now, Ayam had suddenly drawn the katana from his waist and then rushed towards the stage. What followed was the scene before him. Mima Amatori was moving at high speed, slashing, cutting, and stabbing at Ayam from various directions. Although the latter seemed to be in imminent danger, she managed to stand her ground and block all attacks using the most basic sword style. Did Kenji teach her that well? Michiuki Makino could only attribute Yatsugawa Ayam's performance to her father, who was also a high-rank samurai. But he quickly reacted and shouted towards the samurai and soldiers who were starting to calm down. Haven't you realized? Besides General Amatori, there are no Kobane among us. Quickly go and help Princess Ayam. Everyone looked at each other, simultaneously scanning their surroundings, and found that there really were no Kobane. Even those who had been shot and fallen showed no symptoms of turning into Kobane. We were tricked. We were tricked by that bastard. Quickly protect Princess Ayam. Over a dozen samurai were furious. They rushed towards Mima Amatori on the stage with their katanas. Seeing this scene, the latter sneered. A bunch of stupid pigs. The next moment, he kicked Ayam's blade, sending her and her blade flying down the steps. Then, amidst the constantly incoming bullets, he ran to the edge of the main hall and leaped out without hesitation. This was a place nearly 100 meters high from the ground. Chapter 214, The Tacit Shogunate Coup. He committed suicide? Mima Amatori's actions stunned everyone in the main hall. Some samurai who were the fastest to pursue ran to the window and looked down, not only failing to see anyone but also getting dizzy from the height. But no matter what, Mima Amatori had indeed jumped out, there was no doubt about that. From such a height, let alone a person, even a Kobane would break arms and legs, right? Quick, go down and look. Ayam, meanwhile, remained on the high platform. She was exhausted and panting, leaning on the general's stone chair for support. Although the exchange wasn't very long, Mima's attack angles and density were real. She had truly given her all, pushing the swordsmanship she had practiced since childhood to its limit. Princess Ayam, are you alright? Yes, you weren't injured, were you? A group of high-rank samurai and officials led by Michiuki Makino gathered around. Ayam looked at their gazes filled with worry and gratitude, feeling undeserving. But she knew even more clearly that Hinamoto, including herself and even the shogunate, could not be the world government's opponent. Since that was the case, as long as the world government could keep their promise and ensure that the citizens of Hinamoto would no longer be threatened by Kobane or starve, she was willing to cooperate. Nothing was more important than the stable lives of the citizens. Yatsugawa Ayam thought so. I wasn't injured, uncle. Can you bring the loudspeaker over? I think the people outside need to hear the truth. Okay, okay. Wichayuki Makino nodded repeatedly and quickly ran over to pick up the loudspeaker that Mima Amatori had dropped on the ground, bringing it to Ayam. Thank you. Ayam thanked him, then put her mouth to the speaking part of the loudspeaker. This was actually a type of headphones with a microphone, but the people of Hinamoto were used to calling this equipment bought from overseas either a loudspeaker or an amplifier, mainly used for the general to address the entire fortress. Everyone, please listen to me. I am Yatsugawa Ayam, the current chief steward of Aragane Station. As she spoke, her pleasant, gentle yet firm voice was immediately amplified by the real loudspeakers distributed throughout Kongakaku, forcibly reaching the ears of all samurai, soldiers, and ordinary civilians. There are no Kobane entering Kongakaku. It was a rebellion launched by the Hunter Guard led by Mima Amatori.